24th, and I'd like to welcome everybody who's here in the audience, and those who are home watching on TV or on the internet. Thank you for joining us this evening. Madam Clerk, please do the roll call.
Assemblymember Domboski.
Present.
Assemblymember Croft.
Present.
Assemblymember Evans.
Here.
Assemblymember Flynn.
Present.
Chair Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Vice Chair Trainee.
Here.
Assemblymember Steele.
Here.
Assemblymember Peterson.
Present.
Assemblymember Starr.
Here.
Assemblymember Dunbar.
Here.
Assemblymember Weddleton.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'd like to invite Sean McElliott to the podium to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Color Guard, attention. Audience, please rise. Scout salute. Those not in uniform, place your right hand over your heart. Color Guard, forward march. Color Guard, prepare to post the colors. Color Guard, post the colors. Please recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color Guard, dismissed. Troop at ease.
Mr. Trainee?
Madam Chair, if I could for a minute, if the troop would come in front of us to the microphone and tell us who you're affiliated with, your name, and what rank you hold in the Boy Scouts, we'd appreciate it. We'd like to meet you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
And thanks for doing the flag ceremony for us and the pledge.
So I'm Sean McElligott. I'm with Troop 209, and I'm a Life Scout.
My name is Max Jameson. I am also with Troop 209, and I am first class, soon to be star.
My name is Gray English. I'm with Troop 209, and I am a first class scout.
My name is Jordan Lonis. I am with 209, and I'm almost scout.
My name is Bo Titalius. I'm with Troop 209, and I'm almost scout.
My name is Caden McElligott, and I'm with Troop 209, and I am Star Scout.
My name is Grayling Peterson, and I'm a second-class scout.
My name's Pike Peterson. I'm a second-class scout.
My name is Blaine McElligott. I'm with Troop 209, and I'm first class.
My name is Chris Gerboth, and I'm with 209, and I'm second class.
My name is Colby Cartier, and I'm with Troop 29, and I am a Life Scout.
Well, thanks for being here. If the Scoutmaster would come forward for a second, just tell us, if you would please, who sponsors your troop, and are they working on the citizenship in the country, or which merit badge are you working on?
Hi, I'm David Erickson, Scoutmaster of 209, and we are sponsored by Christ Our Savior Lutheran Church, which is in South Anchorage, and there are 3 citizenship badges that the Scouts earn that are required for Eagle Rank, and this one is a requirement towards citizenship in the community. And Scouts work hard towards all 3 of those, and they learn much about how government works. So tonight we're looking forward to them seeing how our local assembly works.
Well, thanks for being here. If there's anything we can do to help them,
glad to be here.
Let us know.
Sure will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Okay, there are no minutes of the previous meeting. Mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Nothing at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assembly Chair report. A couple of announcements so that everyone knows ahead of time. When we get to item ordinance number 2015-142 S13A, it's the cell tower ordinance. We have to open the public hearing, but the plan is to continue the public hearing until the meeting of June 7th, because we're going to have a work session on Friday, June 3rd, from 1 to 3, and we're going to discuss the Assembly members' amendments, and we're also going to hear from the industry, and it just makes sense to not move forward this evening, give ourselves some time. We've been working on this for a very long time, and we want to get it right the first time, at least as close to right. So that's going to happen with that. And then item 14K, Title 15, the Housing Maintenance Code. That, we're going to open the public hearing, but we're going to continue the public hearing to the meeting of June 24th. And the reason is because there is a substitute document that is being drafted right now, and it just makes sense to wait until we get that ordinance in front of us before we continue with the public hearing. But the public will see the ordinance before the public hearing on the 24th. Also, I just want to remind folks that the Budget and Finance Committee meeting is going to be this Thursday from 11:30 to 12:30, followed by ZECO, the work session from our SAP contractor. Next on the agenda is committee reports, and I'll start with Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no committee reports, but I would like to ensure that I made an adequate disclosure on items 14I and J. Madam Chair, if my memory serves, you've already ruled that I can participate, but I don't believe my disclosure was adequate. So item 14I is AR 2016-124, which is an administrative agreement between IFF and local 1264 and the municipality, and it's in regard to probation advancing. And the second one is regarding 14J, which is regarding Chapter 3.30, which is personnel rules specific to police and fire. Madam Chair, I still don't believe I have a conflict. My husband is a captain at Station 11, and he is a member of IFF Local 1264. Specifically to item 14J, there are multiple levels between my husband and the pay grades that are affected, so I don't believe there is any I don't believe there's any conflict or impact at all to my household, but I did want to make it very, very clear that there is at least one step between my husband, I think there's actually two, and depending on the position, more, between Ben and the items being discussed. But I just wanted to make sure that I had an adequate disclosure on the record.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski, and I appreciate your disclosure. The chair rules that you will participate in both motions. Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Mr. Croft.
No, nothing at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On May 11th, we held a joint committee meeting of the Public Safety and the Homelessness Committee on the issue of homeless camps in town. It was mostly an information gathering exercise in which we learned of some of the initiatives that the administration is proposing to address the issue of the camps. We also learned the background of the legal challenges facing the municipality with respect to dealing with the camps, and we heard from some of the public and others as well at that meeting. Can't say that the camps are going to disappear anytime soon, but at least I think all the main players are sort of on the same page as far as how to go about addressing them. On May 18th, we had a homelessness committee meeting in which we were updated with the HUD statistics regarding how many homeless we have in Anchorage and statewide. It was a pretty wide-ranging meeting, provided a lot of information, and the city's homelessness coordinator, Nancy Burke, gave us an update on the city's efforts in that regard. And we have a public safety committee meeting scheduled for June 1st at 11:30 in room 155. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm feeling clairvoyant this evening. AMET's policy committee was canceled 2 days ago.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee.
Nothing, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele.
Yes, Madam Chair. The Enterprise Committee has had a couple of meetings since we last met. On the 12th, the Enterprise Committee heard from AWWU for just a few seconds, but basically it was a meeting on the port, update on the port projects. It was a good meeting. On the 20th, we had a special meeting to hear from Mark Spafford from Solid Waste Services, and he is the acting director there. And we heard from him. We talked to him. We asked questions. The mayor was there. Mike Abbott was there. We had 6 assembly members, including Madam Chair, on the phone. And it was a good conversation. We heard good items. At the end, there was a motion to recommend a positive outcome, and that was a unanimous vote by those present. So good hearing from him. He's a good man. I think we'll be happy with him.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Ms. Dombrowski, you're in the queue.
Madam Chair, I was in queue for Public Safety Committee, but it might actually be a question for the administration, so I can wait if you'd like.
You can ask the question now.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
And I don't know if Mr. Evans or the administration would be the appropriate place to start on this one. But since we have last met, we had a pretty publicized wildfire in the municipality of Anchorage, and it seems the source potentially could have been a homeless camp, but it brought to my mind a whole other issue that I'm not sure has yet to be adequately discussed, and it might be a public safety issue, but that is people flying drones over an active fire scene. What are the current rules, regulations, or fines associated with someone interfering with an active fire scene like that? Are there any? And if there's not, maybe that's something public safety should look at. I mean, it's just a topic that I can anticipate will probably get more prevalent as the years go by.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. It's a good topic for discussion. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics and Election Committee will meet tomorrow at City Hall at noon in room 204, and we'll be getting an update on what's proceeding with the developments in vote by mail, and it should be a very interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. That room will be 240. Yeah, that's okay. Mr. Starr.
Nope, nothing from the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Dunbar.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Weddleton. Committee reports.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Trainee, can I have a motion to incorporate?
Madam Chair, move to incorporate the addendum to the agenda, and also move to incorporate the laid on the table items as part of regular agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Is there a second?
We'll need a second.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Okay, addendum to the agenda. Item 9A1, Resolution AR 2016-166, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing June 18, 2016 as Juneteenth Day in Alaska. Item 9B8, Resolution AR 2016-167, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly lifting its protest of the renewal of alcohol beverage license number 3556 for T&M Enterprises DBA Spirits of Alaska at 1149 Gamble Street. Item 9F, ordinance and resolutions for introduction, AR 2016-168, a resolution approving a collective bargaining agreement between the municipality of Anchorage and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 302. Item 19A, okay. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Trainee is suggesting that I read the entire title for item 9B8, and I'm going to start from the beginning. AR 2016-167, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly lifting its protest of the renewal of alcoholic beverage license number 3556 for T&M Enterprises DBA Spirits of Alaska at 1149 Gamble Street, subject to certain conditions, including the sale of transfer of the license and surrender of the related conditional use permit. Item 19, executive sessions, pending legal matters, re Spirits of Alaska. Laid on table items. Item 9F13, AO 2016-661, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code to allow the building official to extend the permit under Section 23.10.104.31 to waive or reduce fees under Section 23.10.104.34 and to waive or reduce the cash bond under Section 23.10.104.3.5, extension, reduction, and waiver to be subject to public interest findings. Item 9F14, AO 2016-62, an ordinance of the Municipal Assembly providing code interpretation to resolve ambiguity and avoid a rezone application of private expense for business and professional offices zoned I-1 in the Huffman Town Center. Item 15A, notice of motion to amend something previously adopted. Notice is hereby given of a motion to amend AR 2015-261S as amended to confirm that the protest is listed for the restaurant eating place serving beer and wine under license number 5367 AK Alchemist. Mr. Trainee, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. We'll start with Ms. Dombrowski. Anything you'd like to pull?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'd like to pull items 9 Delta 7 and 9 Delta 8.
97, 98. Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. Mr. Croft.
Nothing to pull.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Evans.
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 9, Bravo 8, to change the order of the day.
98 on the addendum.
It's on the addendum, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee.
9A1, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele.
No item.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No items.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Starr.
9 Echo 2.
9E2. Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Dunbar.
No items, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Weddleton.
None, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. 9C2, for the purposes of requesting that it be postponed indefinitely so that we can react to a late arriving protest.
Madam Chair, I'll move to postpone to deal with item 9C2.
Just don't move it. Just pull it and don't move it. That's all you do.
I just pulled it. We're not moving it.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. It's pulled off the agenda. Okay, I'm going to go over everything that was pulled. And 9A1, 9B8, 9C2, 9D7, 9D8, and 9E2. Did I miss anything? Okay, excellent.
We pulled 9E2 also, but I'm not going to introduce that one.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Okay,
C2, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. All right, we are now at, we need to vote on the consent agenda minus the items that we pulled, and I'm going to ask for unanimous consent, and I don't see anybody objecting. The consent agenda is approved. Now we'll go back to items that were pulled, and the first item that was pulled was item 9A1, Resolution 2016-166, recognizing June 18th, 2016 as Juneteenth Day in Alaska. Mr. Trainee.
Madam Chair, move to approve AR 2016-166.
We need a second.
That's item 9A1.
Thank you. Ask unanimous consent. I don't see any one disapproving. That resolution is approved.
Who's presenting and who's receiving?
Mr. Trainee is reading, and Mr. Dunbar is presenting.
I'll wait till they get up here. This is Assembly Resolution AR 2016-166. Resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing June 18th, 2016 as Juneteenth Day in Alaska. Whereas Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the end of slavery in the United States, and whereas Juneteenth Day recognizes June 19th, 1865, when Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce the war's end, and that all slaves were free in accordance with an executive order of President Abraham Lincoln. And whereas it took nearly 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation for the word to reach the last group of slaves that were in fact free men and women. And whereas this year will mark the 151st year of Juneteenth celebrations and the 21st anniversary of organized events celebrated here in Anchorage, and whereas the Alaska State 22nd Legislature passed HB 100 in 2001, establishing third Saturday in June each year to commemorate the abolition of slavery and to reflect on the suffering and sacrifice endured by millions of early African Americans, and to appreciate the unique freedom and equality enjoyed by all state citizens. And whereas a 3-day conference has been planned by the Shiloh Community Development, Inc., starting on Friday, June 3rd, 2016, with a lunch and learn discussion, Race in Alaska, in the Mayor's Conference Room from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., and contributing the celebration with live performances, games, and prizes and contests for the month of June. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly recognizes June 18th, 2016 as Juneteenth Day and encourages the Anchorage community to participate in local events to celebrate African American freedom, heritage, and contributions to our American culture, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this day of May 2016. Signed by the Chairman.
Welcome.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Celeste Hodge Grouden, and on behalf of Shiloh Community Development Incorporated, I want to thank you for this resolution. But before I share additional comments, I just want you to know how excited my heart is right now to see you, L.B. Gray Jackson, Chair, in this position, a historical occasion, and I'm just so grateful. SCDI will host several different activities during the month of June as we celebrate Juneteenth, and we hope and pray that you will take advantage of the invites that we've sent for everyone to come and participate in some of the activities. We decided to go ahead and have an event, and we're thankful to Mayor Berkowitz for allowing us to have our kickoff event in the Mayor's Conference Room, an important subject on race. And I would hope that you take advantage of the opportunity that it's right here in your own backyard. And so we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Shanae Williams, and on behalf of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Alaska Alumni Chapter, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Beverly Jones. I am the president of the Anchorage chapter of Links Incorporated, and I'd like to say on behalf of the Anchorage chapter and Links nationwide, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity.
You're welcome.
I just want to come up and say thank you. I'm the state coordinator for Alaska Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, and I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you so much for the resolution.
Thank you. It's really great to see all four of you here. And just so you know, I'm going to have the clerk's office draft three additional resolutions for my signature that will be given to you. So thank you again for being here this evening.
Thank you.
We are now at agenda item 9B. 8 AR 2016-167, lifting its protest of the renewal of alcoholic beverage license number 3556 for T&M Enterprises, DBA Spirits of Alaska. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move to change the order today to take up this item immediately following item, I think it's 19A,
Wait 1 second.
special order or executive sessions.
Second.
I believe this can take place over our dinner break, but if not, later in the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trainee just reminded me, and I think that we had item 9B7 pulled by Ms. No, it wasn't. Okay, so it wasn't B7. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trainee, but that wasn't pulled. Okay, great. Okay, so with that said, we are now at item 9C2, pulled by Mr. Trainee on behalf of the administration.
It was 9C2, wasn't it?
Right, but as a matter of fact, Mr. Trainee is not going to make any motion, so that's off the table. Okay, we are now at item 9D7, pulled by Mr. Domboski, AM 379, 2016. Exeter Play, Inc., and Northwest Playground Equipment, Inc., to provide playground equipment. Ms. Dombrowski.
Madam Chair, for purposes of discussion, I'll go ahead and move to approve.
Thank you. Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Mr. Rada or the administration wants to take a bite at this one. I'm starting to get a little weary of some of these sole source contracts. And the reason I say that is because there was a great amount of discussion about the previous sole source contract with Turf. And 2 days after we voted on it, I found out that Oberg Field has actually been closed all baseball season because the turf was inappropriately installed or inadequately installed, is what the coaches are saying. So, Mr. Rada, can you please shine some light on what's going on at Oberg, if in fact it is an issue with the contractor, and why this was not disclosed when this came up last time?
Through the chair, Ms. Dombrowski, I'd be happy to answer your questions. Where would you like to start?
At the beginning.
At the beginning, which subject?
So Oberg Field, is the defect at Oberg Field, is that associated with the turf and the contractor?
No, it is not.
Okay, what's going on?
It is the base work performed by a different contractor. The base work has a separate component to the field turf installation. Field turf installs over base work. They do not perform the base work in this particular case. The nailer plate that was secured was not secured adequately and rose with a slight bit of heaving. At my suggestion and with the cooperation of the American Legion, we brought in a compactor. It is perfectly fine and it is ready to go, but we had to wait for the frost to subside and is totally playable.
Okay, because they had full disclosure, my son plays on the team. But I found out later that this particular field they hadn't used it all season. So you're telling me for all of the turf that we just approved on this last time, there's a totally separate contractor that does the underlaying work?
Base work is performed separately. Field turf installs over base work.
Okay, so with the base work that's being performed on all the fields that we just approved for the turf sole source last time, are we using the same contractor that created the problem in Chugiak?
No, we are not.
And when the cost associated with fixing the field in Chugiak, who's responsible for that?
There was no cost. That was borne by the contractor.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. Mr. Starr?
The competitive aspect of bidding these awards, I think, is the core of my concerns, which is it was at the last meeting as well. And when you read the MOAs, I appreciate the interest of both the Parks and Rec Department, most likely Mr. Rada, and the administration to reach out to community councils and active work sessions. But, and I'm not making the accusation, but the vendor appears to be already a seat at the table for that design and perhaps a leg up. And I think when we drift down that road of excluding other, I made this comment at the very last meeting, when we exclude others, I think we run the risk of perhaps either not staying contemporary or open to ideas that are done in other cities, metropolitans. And I don't criticize the administration's decisions lightly, but the sole source nature when you do an internet search on commercial playground equipment, it's just huge, the numbers of, and that's not even going down landscape design, the numbers of vendors that are out there. So where we see the paragraph that says this is the only company that provides this very, very unique design, I take exception to that. It may be that we have a great relationship with this company. It may be that they've done great work in the past. It may be that that's well, but if we don't open up the table to have others come to the bidding table and at least keep the vendors honest and accountable and the process genuine, I would say that we're going to have trouble. So if it's convenience, great, but the idea that we need to go through that process is my criticism. So Mr. Haddon, again, back to the decision in your office to sole source this, why Exeter Play only gets a seat at the conversation with you?
Mr. Starr, through the chair, we don't take these sole sources lightly. We generally, well not generally, we question Parks and Rec. Are they requiring department extensively about why a sole source, and we create the memos based on those discussions. And in this particular case that we're talking about, we felt that the rationale was valid because they had input from the community councils, and this was the equipment that the community councils felt best fit their needs. And I don't take your comments lightly about not having other folks at the table.
So did Exerplay actually go to the community council meetings and negotiate with them over the design?
I would have to defer that to Mr. Rada.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, maybe to help describe the process, we fully engage, whether it's the community councils, and sometimes there's more than one, and we lay out a menu, if you want to call it, for lack of a better phrase, of options. We used to have multiple vendors in Anchorage that supplied play equipment. I'm not going to name one of them specifically that I dealt with for 15 years. They went out of business. They used to be the only vendor who supplied product in Alaska 15 years ago. Since then, others have come and others have gone. We rely on what we can depend on, both for product as well as the quality as well as the service that comes with individual vendors. And we take each of those and we put them before the community councils, the respective parks committees that are subsets of those councils, and we allow them the opportunity to examine each opportunity that could fit in within a design element, if you will, that they're asking for.
Can I stop you just for a minute? You mentioned vendors, so are you negotiating with these vendors outside of a purchase contract?
No, we're not negotiating. We're laying examples. We have a host of catalogs that we let people look at, and in this case, for the fully inclusive playgrounds, there are some that don't adequately meet what we're trying to accomplish based on what the desire of the council is, so we begin to narrow that down. It's a challenge for us and it's a challenge for them, but ultimately it's a very thoughtful process. It's looked at 3, 4, 5 times over before we make a decision. And when we do that, it's not done to try to circumvent any process. It's meant to give the product delivery, the quality of the product, the experience to the end user, so that we feel very satisfied that we have made the right choice on their behalf. But it's only with their blessing as well. We don't do this randomly. So each one of these has been done, and you have another one to follow that has to do with Muldoon. In both cases, and I believe Mr. Peterson could recognize this, and I'm not sure of Mr. Dunbar, but through the Northeast Community Council and the individuals there, they chose the products. We didn't choose them for them. They chose the products. That's what they want in their parks, and that's how this has come forward. So with all due respect, we do look at it closely, and we don't try to exclude other potential vendors, but we do put lots on the table. We let the people make the choices.
Thank you for the clarity, Mr. Rada. I think you and I have worked together for a long time here, both in my community as your sole director for ours and now overall. So it is a criticism to both departments, bluntly, is that I think by filtering, by developing those relationships outside of a bid package or a conversation that's directed under our Section 7 purchasing codes, however successful that may be on your behalf, I think the appearance is that it may be that we're focusing it down so that one wins. And I never want to be accused of that. So it's a slippery slope or a very narrow plank that you're walking, and I'll go ahead and continue to support that. But now 2 meetings in a row, I've sent a message that the bidding and however we like it or don't like it, whether it be competitively for pricing or for the allowability for others, as my point's made, is that other markets that we don't even know about could be coming to the table and say, wow, look at this. I mean, who knew about zip lines years ago and all the other stuff? So we need to stay contemporary as much as we need to stay cost effective and then get good quality. So, and I don't need you to comment on that. I'm just going to be critical of it so that we don't get too far out there and get accused of things that aren't necessarily happening.
Okay. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Peterson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And just For information purposes, we were on a very tight timeline to develop this park. We had a $1 million grant from the legislature that was going to expire on the June 30th, and so they were moving forward as quickly as possible to develop a master plan for the park. And so that may have had something to do with the no bid contract. I'm not sure, but we did make it under the wire. We did get to keep the grant because they were looking for money in Juneau, and we were afraid they were going to drag it back and take it away from us. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Seeing no one else in the queue, we have a first and a second. Please vote. That motion passes unanimously. We're now down to item 9D8, Assembly Memorandum 380-2016, sole source purchase from Extra Play, Inc. for playground equipment. Ms. Domboski.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Starr covered it far better than I ever could. Again, it's just when we're sole sourcing, I think we have to be very cautious, and it shouldn't be something that is blanketly done routinely. So I think he covered it well, and I appreciate Mr. Rada's explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We are now down to item 9E2, AIM 59-2016, Annual Municipal Procurement Card Review. Mr. Starr.
Move to refer to committee.
Second.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, I don't have my June calendar set for the audit committee yet, but I don't want to accept the report tonight. I'd like to see a presentation at the audit committee from those involved. And I really don't want to debate it, but those that have the blue foldered, it's not particularly nice what's in there, and so I think it bears true. We're not the executive branch, but we have the accountability to see solutions work on purchasing inside the municipality. So enough said. I don't really have the action item in front of us, but I will try to have a committee meeting in the first half of June here and get some comments coming in from the administration on corrective measures. Thank you.
So, Mr. Starr, would you like to make a motion to postpone accepting this to the meeting of June 24th? Is that the
21st?
21st?
That'll be fine, yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. That item is postponed until the meeting of June 21st. That ends the consent agenda, but I would like to take a moment to thank all of our citizens in our community who stepped up and are now members of a board or commission. We thank you for your service. And if there's anyone here that was appointed, please come up to the podium and tell us your name and what board you were appointed to, if there's anyone still here who was appointed. No? Okay. Well, thank you again. We are now down to item 11A, AM 319-2016, Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeal
Move approval,
appointment.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Is there a second? First, there's a first and second. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We are now down to, well, we can't do appearance requests yet, and we can't do continued public hearings yet. So, Mr. Trainee, I think it may be time for that motion, the executive session.
Let me drag it out of here. Madam Chair, I make a motion to go into executive session to discuss pending legal matters. Spirits of Alaska, if immediately disclosed, would have an adverse effect on the finances of the municipality of Anchorage.
Second.
I want to do it during our dinner break, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Domboski, we are now going to break to go in executive session. We'll see you shortly. It doesn't matter.
Madam Chair, we had an executive session on the Spirits of Alaska issue. I move to withhold the tape from publication until all litigation related to this matter as resolved, including any legal appeals.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Is there a second?
Second.
I ask unanimous consent, and for those who are present, I don't see any objection, so that the tape will be released as stated by Mr. Trainee. We're now down to item 11A, Assembly Memorandum 319-2016, Zoning Board of Examiners. Did we do that already?
We already did that.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't make a note that we already dealt with that.
Couples next at 6.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. We're now down to item 12A, Emery Couples regarding the segregation of Town Square Park. Mr. Couples, please come to the microphone. And you have 3 minutes.
Sorry.
That's okay. I thought I was interrupted. Oh, no, I appreciate it. Welcome, Mr. Couples.
Thank you for approving my request to appear here this evening. I don't go downtown very much anymore, but the last time I did, about a month ago, I was referred to as an old man. I was asked twice if I wanted to buy some marijuana. I heard lots of vulgar words that is not in keeping with the creators of the park. All of the Anchorage Garden Club members whose vision was to have a downtown park are all dead. My mother, Avis Couples, was very instrumental, along with other dedicated Anchorage Garden Club members, to see that we had a downtown park, and it was a real struggle. But the park that we have now was to be an oasis of beauty, flowers, trees, friendly people, and music in the park, and a place to go when you wanted tranquility. The park, the city ran out of money. The widow of Richard L. Silberger put up $500,000 to create a fountain. And I don't know how long that fountain hasn't been working, or why it isn't working. But in this paper recently, it says there's a space for everyone. Well, I think that's true. A space for everyone that is operating their life in a legal manner and not causing problems for people that are operating their life. There's also a place called the Anchorage Jail for people that don't want to behave. And why has that park downtown deteriorated under the leadership of the Assembly and the Mayor's office? This goes back to Mayor Sullivan, and it's carried on over to Mayor Berkowitz. But why isn't something done to put Town Square back like it originally was?
Thank you, Mr. Couples. Thank you so much for being here. Your time is up, but Mr. Trainee has a question or a comment. Thank you so much.
Mr. Couples, our next meeting, Ms. Gray Jackson introducing an ordinance we think that will help to clean up town square. So look at our ordinance we're introducing next assembly meeting. It's our goal to try and clean up what's happening down there in town square. It should be an area that's accessible to everybody who lives in Anchorage, not just taken over by the people that want to inhabit it. So, thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Thank you, Mr. Couples.
A mother with a young child is intimidated and will not go into the park as it exists today. And I think it's a slap in the face to every garden club member that labored to create a park for downtown, including my mother.
Right. Mr. Couples, thank you so much. There are efforts that are going to occur to make that park a better place for all of us. So thank you very much. And
Is that going to be happening pretty quick?
Pretty quick.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Again, thank you for being here this evening. Okay, we are now down to item 13A, AO 2015-142, provisions
Chair.
regarding telecommunication facilities, including cell towers. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The motion on item 9, Bravo 8, was to take it up following our executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Would you like to make a motion?
Well, I think it's currently in order to be taken up at this time. So if it's before us by dint of your prerogative, I will make the motion to approve it.
Mr. Flynn, thank you for reminding me. Could you make a motion to approve it?
Second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move to approve item 9, Bravo 8.
You're welcome, Mr. Flynn. We had a first and a second. I don't see anyone in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. Again, thank you, Mr. Flynn. We are now down to item 13A, AO 2015-142, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Title 21, provisions regarding telecommunication facilities, including cell towers. We also have AM 793-2015. We also have an AIM 2016-4. We have an S version, 2015-142S, and another AM 793-2015A. And as mentioned earlier, the public hearing is going to be open this evening, but we are going to continue the public hearing to the meeting of June 21st because we're going to have a work session on June 3rd from 1 to 3 in City Hall in the Assembly Conference Room 155 to talk about the Assembly's amendments and to get it right before we're on the floor. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Welcome.
Okay, Madam Chair and members of the Assembly, my name is Kathy Gleason, CATHYGLEASON, and I won't be in town on the 21st of June, so I'm going to take advantage of an opportunity to speak to this this evening. And it's been kind of a long road to get where we're at, and I appreciate everyone's work on this to get it, the S version, to where it is today and some of the amendments. And overall, I support the Assembly amendments that were submitted, with the exception of one, and really appreciate the efforts that the Assembly has made. With regard to conditional use provision for type 1, 2, and 3 towers, on page 5 of the S version, I have concerns about just automatically saying anything non-permitted in the tables, you can go ahead and apply for it anyway in the various zoning districts where it's not permitted. It just has to go through a conditional use process. That makes it seems like it makes it a little too easy for the providers to just skip over and bypass consideration of the small cell, DAS, or stealth towers. And so I want the Assembly to think long and hard about that provision. I just, based on work sessions and other discussions, it sounds like the providers currently are going to drag their feet on those that our community group really want to see in the residential areas. With regard to landscaping and fencing, I've submitted 3 proposed amendments on page 12. It includes the Parks and Recreation District and requiring landscaping around fencing and requiring wooden fencing as opposed to other kinds of fencing. And this really got triggered when I attended a Parks and Rec Commission meeting earlier this month, and a mono tower is proposed out at Kincaid Park, and I was told that they presented at the Sand Lake Community Council, and they said they would put landscaping around the fencing, and lo and behold, the presenter at the Parks and Rec Commission said, we decided we can't do landscaping around the fencing because there's no water source. Well, my husband and I have volunteered many, many years planting trees in our parks and caring for them after they're planted for several years. A lot of times there's not a water source there either, but we just haul water in jugs that we bought at Fred Meyer. It's doable. It shouldn't be a hindrance in providing aesthetics at our parks. And lastly, on Exhibit A, I'd like to go ahead and see that a posted sign is required under the site plan review, administrative site plan review. It just seems silly to not require that one mode of communication to the public that something is being proposed in their neighborhood when all the other 3 modes of communication are required. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
Thanks, Ms. Gleason, for paying attention to this stuff. I wanted to let you know that out in the Chugiak area, we have a concealed tower. I think it's probably the only one that meets the criterion for concealment. And if you drive to the neck of the woods, you should look it up. It's very impressive on how they've done it. And
well, I've seen photos that Ms. Demboski has shown us, and it is impressive, yes.
If we stood on the sidewalk and showed you exactly which tree it was, you probably still wouldn't see it.
Probably not, yeah.
We're looking pretty good, so I think that's the nature of the amendment that you see where you reference it on the permitted uses, large towers and residential, with the concealment requirement. So thank you for paying attention to this stuff.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Thank you, Ms. Gleason. Anyone else? I'm sorry, Mr. Weddleton.
Ms. Gleason? Hi. Your comments on the conditional use, do you know that for conditional use for the cell tower, it had additional criteria that's not in the normal conditional use process?
I'm not sure what all it entailed because I couldn't figure it out. And I was going to start out my testimony, I forgot. I apologize in advance if I've confused things through S version, original version, amendments, and maybe don't know what I'm talking about. But from what I was seeing, that for towers types 1, 2, and 3, they were non-permitted on table, whichever table it was. Exhibit C. But then now they are allowed with a conditional use permit. And yes, I mean, if you're going to allow them, we absolutely, public would and community councils would want that criteria conditional use permit requirement because that allows for not only positive notice, but we can testify and hear the body hearing our testimony, discuss and make decisions out in the open in a very transparent way. But I'm still thinking that that's just kind of an out for the providers who really don't want to provide small cell and DAS and stealth to begin with. So I'm concerned about it, but I have confidence that this body will come up with something that will make sure that that's not something they just automatically choose now, but will make first consideration to the other modes of technology that's out there.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. And Ms. Gleason, if you're in town on June 3rd, please join us at our work session from 1 to 3.
Okay, I'll mark my calendar.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, the public hearing is continued. I need a motion.
Move to continue the public hearing to the 21st of. Move to continue the public hearing to the 21st of June, ma'am.
Second.
Thank you. The public hearing will be continued to the 21st of June, and as mentioned earlier, the work session is on the 3rd, and there will be a substitute ordinance that will be available for the public before the meeting on the 21st. We are now down, oh, okay, thank you. Clerk just reminded me that we needed a vote on continuing. Please start voting. Thank you, Madam Clerk. You're welcome. That was approved unanimously. We are now at agenda item number 14A, AR 2016-139, a resolution appropriating $175,000 of Alaska Center for the Performing Arts Capital Reserve account for facility improvements at the Alaska Center for the Performing Arts. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Thank you, Mr. Trainee. We need a second.
Second, Weddle.
Thank you. Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need to understand, make sure I'm reading this correctly. Part of this expenditure is obviously truly capital repairs, it looks like. But the other portion of this, how much are we spending on a piano?
Would someone like to answer that question for Ms. Dombrowski?
Oh, I can read. I definitely want the I want the administration to express to me exactly how much we're spending on a piano.
And Mr. Schutte and Ms. Harbour would be glad to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott.
Let's invite Nancy here.
Is it?
My name is Nancy Harbour. I am the Executive Director, President of the Alaska Center for the Performing Arts. Ms. Dombrowski, we are asking for $25,000 to come out of the Alaska Center's reserve to go towards a new Steinway piano. We don't have a grand piano anymore, and the cost of that grand piano is $160,000, and we are raising all of that money. Many of the donors who historically give to the Performing Arts Center also want to see a contribution from the city, since the minute that piano hits the building, it is tagged as a municipal asset.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying the cost of the piano is $160,000.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said that money is actually being raised through the donors.
Through private sector, yes.
So why do you need $25,000 of municipal money if it's being raised by the donors? I just don't understand.
When you go out to try to raise money for this facility, because it is the municipality's building, most donors want to see contributions from all of the players, and because this is a municipal building, it's very difficult for us to go to, say, the Rasmussen Foundation to ask for money if the municipality doesn't have money in the game. And so we've asked to have that $25,000 come out of our reserve account in order to show these donors that we are approaching that the municipality has contributed to it as well.
Okay, and if I can ask, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure I'm clear. The money from the reserve account, where does that come from?
The reserve account money comes from 10% of our monthly rentals and any net assets that we have at the end of each fiscal year. That's how all of that money has been amassed over the last 20 years.
Okay, and does money from the reserve account also go to repair and maintain the Performing Arts Center?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll just take this opportunity to use, I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you.
There are others in the queue, though, that might.
Okay, then I'll hold.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. Mr. Starr?
The ticket surcharge that we have at the facility use, how long is that proposed to continue? Forever?
I wish I could answer that question. I would have to talk to someone within the municipality, because that $3 is 100% going to repay the cost to put the new roof on.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say to you, I'm sure someone will shoot me, never, because at some point in the future, there'll be another roof repair necessary. So once you have a fee like that that has been put in place and people are paying, I sort of hate to make it go away. But the answer to that question is, it is 100% collected by us and turned over to the municipality on a quarterly basis, and right now it is paying off the roof revenue bond.
When we have, they're all good events, trust me, but when we have a big one like Lion King or a big rush on that, do we end up generating additional surplus capital in your purview? I know you're obligated to pay back $3 per ticket, but do you generally make other profits that could go down to pay down the note to make those shows and some of that more affordable?
Well, in the case of Lion King, we sold 82,000 tickets to that show, and $3 from every one of those tickets went into what we call the surcharge pot that comes to the municipality. In the case of Lion King, and frankly every other activity that happens at the Performing Arts Center, we rent this facility, and so there's revenue there. The revenue from rent, the revenue from general ticket fees, not the surcharge, go to operate the building. The appropriation that is made from the municipality to manage the Performing Arts Center is about 48% of the annual costs, and we earn or solicit through contributions the remaining part of that revenue.
Is that the principal balance for the reserve account then, or how does the reserve account get replenished?
It is replenished by 10% of every rental. So if I make $1,000 from renting the Sidney Lawrence Theater, 10% of that money on a quarterly basis goes into that reserve account. We write a check to the municipality, and at the end of the year, if we have any net assets left, 100% of those net assets go back to replenish that reserve. Every dime that is currently in that reserve comes from those two sources.
Yeah, I was hoping for a big surplus and we could start to pay down the roof loan ahead of schedule, but that's just been one goal.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. But if we could get more shows like Lion King, that surcharge amount of money would go up. But it's very difficult to get those kinds of shows.
I get the question a lot, partly from the ticket stubs and from the extra fees that folks feel are we just sort of tagging on, and a show should cost X, and there's these extra things, much like my cell phone bill.
Well, traditionally, obviously, a Performing Arts Center has to be paid for, and in the partnership between the municipality, and I look at it as if you're paying us a fee to manage that building, and we use that 48% to put with your investment, and we manage that building. And ticket, I sort of look at it relative to the roof, that repair is 100% being paid for by ticket buyers, people who come to the Performing Arts Center. I don't necessarily believe that all the other capital improvements that are made in facilities, we can say that. So I personally think that that's a really good thing. But I don't see that there are going to be multiple opportunities for huge amounts of monies to be earned that would drop into that surcharge. So I think it's a steady sort of, as long as we manage the building appropriately and we book 600 events a year, you're going to have that surcharge money until it's done. And I know there are people in finance who could tell you that, but
it's
not me.
Affordability. I mean, if we drop the ticket prices by $3, would more people, feel like they could come in? I don't know. Is $3 or is it $10 or is it more affordable? Some of those shows are very expensive, and not everyone can go.
True enough.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Trainee?
Hi, Nancy. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great, thanks.
Would you explain to the body why we need the 9-foot piano? We used to have one there. What happened to the one we had?
In the early days of the Performing Arts Center, some of you will remember that we didn't even have a vacuum cleaner, and we did not have any pianos. And
You had buckets to get water.
What?
You had buckets to get water.
That's true. That's true. Within a couple of years, we heard from the Yamaha Piano Company out of New York that they were developing a new program where they placed Yamaha pianos into major performing arts centers. And, that was sort of a boon to us because we knew that we didn't have to pay for those pianos. And it was a program that was begun in the late 80s, early 90s. About 6 years ago, they informed us that they were beginning to eliminate that program. And we had a Yamaha 7.6, a 7-foot 6-inch grand piano, and a 9-footer. And 6 years ago, they took the 7.6 out, and that's a piano that was used a great deal. And as a result of a contribution from the Atwood Foundation, we were able to replace that piano. Last summer, it was about a year ago, we were informed they were considering taking the 9-foot back, and last summer they did that. So we, for all intents and purposes, didn't have anything, but we actually bought an upright piano from the Egan Center when they were surplusing it, and we had another Yamaha upright that was purchased by a donor and given to us. But we, in essence, didn't have any grand pianos. The Symphony's Steinway was the only piano in the building. And we have many, many times when 2 pianos are needed. So that's when our board decided to undertake this fundraising campaign to purchase a new Steinway D grand piano.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'll be supporting this because they used to have the Yamaha. The Yamaha stopped that program, so we don't have the piano. And I appreciate the desire to have some money from the city put into this so we can get donations from the rest of Anchorage. Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
For your help there.
You're welcome.
Comment? No? Okay. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing none? Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. Thank you. Please vote. That was approved 10-1. We're now down to item 14B, AR 2016-140, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $397,110 from Alaska Housing Finance Corporation for case management services for clients of Chugach View and Chugach Manor. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you. There's no one in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We're now down to item 14C, AR 2016-141, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $583,963 as a contribution from the 2016 Maintenance and Operations Department for major municipal facility upgrades and repairs. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
There is no one in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We're now down to item 14D, AR 2016-142, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $310,000 from Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority for the water main extension at Yosemite Drive as related to the Yosemite Drive upgrade project. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Mr. Starr.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, Mr. Abbott, you're probably familiar with this one the most. I am always concerned on the size of the assessments that occur in my district, partly because of the long frontage. What's likely to happen in future? This action is taking the water main a certain distance. First off, if we're ripping up the street entirely, why aren't we going the whole length with the water main? And then where will future assessments come into play?
We can get AWU back to answer some of the more questions about further. This extension is being done at the request of the Mental Health Trust Authority. So it'll access their property along, I believe, both sides of the road. So they are the, I think they're the only landowners that would be accessing water from Yosemite Drive. So I'm not sure there will be further extensions. The subdivision at the end is served separately.
Right.
So this is for the benefit of the Mental Health Trust properties, definitely for their property on the south, I believe also for their property on the north. And
We have
Jerry, okay, Jerry's nodding, I think I got it right.
I don't want to get into it. It's boring for this group here, but the maintenance yard, MOA, Parks and Rec has, do we serve them with city water?
They don't have a request for city water at this time.
Well, there's my point,
I mean, you're right. I guess in a future iteration, if they use the site differently, they or or we use the site differently, conceivably it could tap into the same system.
Yeah.
We're certainly the line that we're constructing will be available to them.
Yeah.
And they'd be assessed for it at that time. But the
I guess
economics are built.
This is a great deal. I mean, I've seen assessments of $150,000 for a single line hookup to residential in my community.
It's a screaming deal for the trust.
Yeah, exactly.
They're getting, because we're doing the road at the same time, the incremental cost of adding the pipe and the service connection is very inexpensive.
Yeah, well, it's good business, certainly. I just would like to see, I don't know about the prison down there farther, but it seems if we're ripping up the whole road, I'd hate to have a water line upgrade because the municipality owns other property down at the end of that road. So it's okay, but it's a screaming deal. So when you guys see residential assessments of $150,000, $170,000 in my community for a single-family house, remember this one. This is a great deal. So anyhow, thanks for orchestrating it. It's the time to do it is when we rip up the street. But, boy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Steele.
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Abbott, is the school district through at this point? I remember the history of that particular line. I remember the problems we had initially before we even opened the school with the runoff from the parking area and having to put in that retainment down at the end, and then claims that we had to upgrade the street and so on and so forth. It just seems it's a good deal for the developer because the school district has been paying and has paid an awful lot for that.
The project is fully funded, primarily with legislative grants. What you all appropriated a month or so ago, the delta, the $1.5 million difference between what the grants provided and what the project was expected to pay, and that came from the school district. So if the project ultimately is delivered under budget, the school district will get the benefit of that and will draw less than their $1.5 million. We'll return some of their funds. So the project does have an integrated drainage system in it, both the collection system in the street as well as the outfall system, and that should alleviate the issues associated with the site drainage at Eagle River High School.
But they do have to keep that reservoir, is that correct? Just to collect
They may have to keep that for the purpose of on-site retention, but they won't have to worry about the overflow as they have during big rain or thaw events in the past.
All right. Thank you, ASD.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. There's no one else in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We're now down to item 14E, AR 2016-150, approving a special land use permit for package store license number 4779 for Great Brothers LLC, DBA Crush. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Hello, sir.
Hi, Madam Chair. My name's Scott, and I am one of the owners of Great Brothers and Crush, and just here to answer any questions.
Please spell your last name.
Anaya, A-N-A-Y-A.
Thank you. You don't have any comments? You're just here to answer questions? Well, there's no one in the queue, so you're fine. Have a seat, sir. There's no one in the queue, so please vote.
Move to approve.
Oops.
Jeepers.
No. I didn't close the public hearing.
Thank you, but I would like to comment.
I didn't see you. I'm sorry, Mr. Starr.
I didn't put
Mr.
it
Starr.
myself in yet because I didn't have a chance.
Okay, Mr. Starr.
I have no questions for them. Public hearing's closed.
No, I didn't close the public hearing.
Oh, I don't have a question for them. I thought you were going to close the public hearing. Then I'd like to
I'm
speak.
going to. Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Mr. Starr.
Just a learning moment for the body. This whole thing is called a. Did we move to approve?
Okay.
Yeah, I made the motion.
Okay, thank you. Was there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
We, through the changes in Title 21, have changed what has traditionally been known as a conditional use permit. So we, as a body, need to start focusing in on this new word called a special land use permit. I'd prefer we didn't call it a SLUP. Somebody did that, and it just doesn't seem right, considering the importance of it. And I think these tend to come and go. This is a great operator. We've seen another facility where they do a good job, in quotes, all of that. But the conditional use becomes specific to that location. So it's there, and I'm trying to educate the body because I'm strategizing now with changes to the process of that, and specifically new ones, so that we sunset these or we have an automatic time where the vendor would come back to us after a year. I'm not going to do it tonight because it's punitive to these folks who are, in quotes, a good operator, but we have to start paying attention to this, and I guess the people in each district, you helped me with Quake in my district. This is going to be a good operator, but we just saw the one up on Gamble that turned out to not be. So remember the difference between a liquor license and then a conditional use, or in this case now the new words, special land use permit. I urge approval. It's great, but the point is once we give it away, we can't get it back. It's very hard to change. The petitioner can change it on himself. The chief of police can change it. Administrative hearing, if they're a bad operator, they get to go through the law, which is probably right.
Okay.
But in our case, we can't, as an assembly body, reach in and grab this back and make changes. It's very hard. So just know that when we have liquor vendors that don't do a great job, our hands are tied, and we need to fix that a little bit. So enough of my spiel. I thought we'd have a learning moment. So urge approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. I don't see anyone else in the queue, so please vote. Perfect. That was approved unanimously. We're now down to item 14F, AR 2016-153, approving an alcohol beverage conditional use for package store license number 5461 for Great Brothers LLC DBA Crush. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Mr. Starr.
I'll move to approve it. I didn't speak. I thought somebody else pushed.
Second.
Okay. Do you have any comments? You were in the queue.
I have a question. Maybe Patrick Flynn can answer this one. Who's the vendor that sits out in front of the Fifth Avenue Mall, or whatever we call it, there by Nordstrom's?
You're getting to my question, because that's Crush. So I'm trying to, they're on 6th, actually.
Okay, so.
This is for 5th, so I want to figure out what's going on.
I'm trying to see how that is being done now. How are they able to do that? Street side vending of alcohol. And then what does this do?
Yeah. So, Mr. Anaya, could you come up to the podium for us?
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn is in the queue. Mr. Flynn.
Yeah. So, Mr. Anaya, you have the wine bar on the ground floor. I believe the package store is upstairs across Nordstrom on 6th Avenue.
Right.
This is an application for 5th Avenue, just west of where the Sullivan Steakhouse is, roughly?
So, yes, but this was the liquor license that became available through the municipality that we applied for, but we actually didn't get this license. I wasn't actually aware that this would be on. So we were drawn out of a can with another applicant, and we actually didn't secure this license. So this is actually
superfluous.
Moot. Yep.
Okay, so your intent was just out of curiosity, and you don't have to answer anything that would give away your business strategy.
Right.
Was your intent to have a second outlet, or were you just migrating so you had a ground floor?
No, we were going to have a second ground floor. It's amazing. A lot of tourists don't want to walk upstairs, one flight of stairs, and we were also going to feature more local Alaska products like Homer wine and stuff like that for
So we may
tourists.
see this in the future should a license come available.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, well, we just made one available. Okay, that's all, Madam Chair. So you wouldn't mind if we postpone this indefinitely, and then you'll bring it back if you get a license?
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Flynn.
postponing indefinitely, just so you're clear, that kills it, and you'd have to start over.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr.
Sorry,
Starr?
Get there.
Ms. Tucker, you're knowledgeable on this stuff. How can the applicant do this to a site-specific location that he doesn't own? Doesn't the owner of the facility have to be in the queue here, or in the equation?
They were the lessor.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, the liquor license is held by an applicant. Irrespective of land use, the conditional use permit, the applicant needs to make sure that that's secured. Is your concern that the landowner here doesn't have a notice that a tenant is applying for the conditional use?
That's part of it, and if Mr. Flynn didn't kill this off entirely, it's potentially possible that the property owner could come back and do this all over with somebody else, I would think, because the conditional use is in place for this address, and if somebody else tendered a liquor permit, they could do the same thing. I'm not saying that's wrong, it just seems to be that the property owner holds all the benefit, and it's address specific, is it not?
The conditional use is address specific, and once the assembly awards that, then that runs with that property in any change of ownership and in changes of lease agreements until it is revoked, abandoned, or expires.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, Mr. Flynn, your interest is to postpone indefinitely then, because I have some concerns about that topic that Ms. Tucker just raised.
Okay, well, then I'll make the motion to postpone indefinitely so we can discuss.
Well, the action item on the floor is there. Certainly I could vote no, but
sure. Okay.
I mean, I can vote no on the action item itself, but if you're going to move that, I'll second that.
Okay, I'll move to postpone indefinitely.
I'm done, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn, you made a motion. Is there a second?
Yes.
I seconded it, Albie.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Appreciate Mr. Anaya being here. Now understand better, because actually one of my other colleagues said, are they getting a new one for the place they already have? And I said, no, this is around the block. I did have one more question for you, though. If you did open it, would it have access from the inside of the mall as well as the outside, or just the outside?
Just the outside at this point.
Okay. Yep. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that one. Yep. Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. You're not going to postpone indefinitely, so we're going to vote on this. I don't see anyone in the queue, so let's vote.
The motion on the floor is to postpone indefinitely, Madam Chair.
I apologize. I didn't quite get it, Mr. Flynn. Too much conversation between the two of you. There was a first and second. The motion is to postpone indefinitely. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We're now down to item number 14C, AR 2016-151, a resolution approving an alcoholic beverage conditional use permit for Host International, Inc., DBA Sleeping Lady Airport Lounge. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Dombrowski? Mr. Starr?
I don't know who to ask the question to, but basically the operator of the airport, State of Alaska, has said, we look forward to working with this vendor as their project develops. So my point again is the same, is that once this is in place, it's always in place. So maybe it's to Ms. Tucker, the lease doesn't appear to be modified unless I missed it earlier today. The lease doesn't appear to be modified with lease conditions. How do we know what the operating terms are between the Sleeping Lady Beverage and the owner, meaning the airport group.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, I don't know that you do. For the most part, operating conditions are in code and under Anchorage Municipal Code Title 10, and also, under Title 4 for operation of the license.
Okay. Well, I mean, because it's a big place and public sector, I mean, I think it's okay to vendor alcohol before people get on airplanes, but I don't know the answer to that, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, and I appreciate Mr. Starr's desire to be a little bit more measured in how we approve these permits. I'm pretty comfortable with this one. This is behind security. I actually read through this pretty carefully. This is behind the security gate, so you already have a measure of control as to who's going there and where they're going next and so on and so forth. So I'm pretty comfortable that, and of course Host is a big operator in multiple jurisdictions, including ours, and I've never heard of them having significant problems. So.
I would only retort that what we do when we approve conditional uses is we sort of also set the tone and the use criteria of that area. So if we want to be known as one big long bar, then let's be known as that. But I think there's also equal weight to tourist shops, to educational centers, opportunities inside that gate for that. So, like I said, I'm happy that people want to, slug back a few before they get on the planes, but we want to also make room for that, and I don't want to be just known as one long drinking establishment.
It does interfere with some of the nice displays they have up there.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
That's a fair point.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Thank you, Mr. Starr. I don't see anyone else in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We are now down to agenda item 14H, AR 2016-152, approving an alcohol special land permit for retail sales of alcohol and distillery license number 5462 for Anchorage Distillery, LLC. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Thank you. There's no one in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We are now down to agenda item 14I, AR 2016-124, Administrative Agreement IAFF 2016-03 between the Municipality of Anchorage and the International Association of Firefighters Local 1264. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Mr. Starr.
Do we have somebody from Labor Relations, or maybe, Mr. Mayor, you can answer the question on how did the request to open the collective bargaining agreement occur in this situation?
I can start, and Karen Turner may be able to fill in some of the details. As the contract was being implemented at the beginning of this year, it was clear that there was the language that was written in the contract did not reflect the intent of the people that negotiated it in one relatively narrow area, and so we mutually agreed to propose this amendment to address that concern.
So the formality of this wasn't necessarily the two clauses in there that say either the meet and confer or the request to mutually open.
This was a subject that was discussed during the bargaining process that led to the contract that was adopted last year, and during the implementation of the contract in January, it became clear that the plain language of the contract, which was agreed to by all the parties, did not reflect the actual intent of both bargaining teams. And so we determined mutually that this was the right way to address that error in drafting.
Okay, thank you. I'll have that same vein of questioning for a couple of the other topics as it relates to notification of the Assembly should requests for bargaining conversations occur. But thank you for your answer and the knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Evans?
Just a brief question for the administration or the fire department. Are firefighter personnel ever placed on probation for performance issues?
No, that's not a part of the discipline or performance evaluation process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. There is no one else in the queue. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. We are now down to Agenda Item 14J, AO 2016-53, an ordinance to create a public safety pay plan limited to police and fire department employees, eliminating the pay incentives for the fire department, and other related changes. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing, please come to the podium, state your name, spell your last.
I'm Todd Butler, B-E-T-L-E-R. I'm a member of the Tudor Area Community Council, lived in Anchorage for 53 years, know most of the Assembly members if they're Democrats because I'm a registered Democrat. And I'm actually just trying to establish the fact that I have no, kind of hidden agenda for opposing what I've read in the paper about, if I'm, speaking to the right subject, about pay raises for public safety employees, because they're getting out of the union apparently and moving on to a supervisory role. And this issue has been going on for 40 years. Do public safety employees get paid too much money? It's always around us. It causes a lot of divisiveness in the community that you hear it, I'm sure, from people that oppose it. But even among us moderates, it's a concern. Where does the wage inflation stop here? And I see, Mr. Evans, of course, agreeing with me. And I guess maybe on this point I'm a little conservative. But, what I see and where my perspective comes from is, I feel like I'm a pretty middle-class kind of person, have made middle-class kind of salary my whole life. Am a retired state employee, Tier 1, have a pension, small pension, have the health benefit, which I'm very appreciative of. But I find myself arguing with my conservative friends constantly about the role of unions in our economy. And all unions tend to get lumped together when what is really happening is these guys are mad at the amount of money that our public safety employees make with overtime, with their wages. I understand that. I am a union member. I'm a member of a trade union, or, public employees union. But what I'm seeing, being politically active is as the middle class wages stagnate, there are certain, people, whatever group they're in, whether it be corporate executives or union members or whatever, whose wages and salaries are just far exceeding, those of the rest of us that, have been stuck really in kind of a time lag as far as, wages and salaries go for a very long time. Rick Mystrom, back in the 90s, if I remember correctly, tried to break a union contract, which he didn't succeed. I remember he spent about $1 million trying to do it and wasn't successful. May I speak for a couple more minutes or no?
Not a couple more minutes, but maybe 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. Anyway, his point is when he was mayor, as a Republican, he could be the mayor of lights and flowers. I'm saying as a progressive assembly with a progressive mayor, we might be able to do something about the disparity that people feel public safety employees have in wages. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else wish to be heard? Welcome. Please state your name, spell your last.
Don Smith, S-M-I-T-H. The reason I came up tonight was I just came back from traveling around the lower 48, and one of my brother-in-laws, he's a retired fireman from the Anchorage Fire Department. And some years ago, there was quite a bit of extra money in our fire fund, and they gave out a bunch of money, like anywhere from 90 to 110 grand. My brother-in-law, there was a deal in it that he thought, well, his group, apparently I don't know the whole facts of it, but it seemed kind of not right the way it went across. I guess there was 2 or 3 groups all of a sudden they split up into. Well, my brother-in-law thought the way it came out was, okay, he ended up getting $10,000. My folks had 4 or 5 firefighters, runners in their facilities that had only been on the fire department for 2 or 3 years. They got about $90,000 to $100,000 each. My brother-in-law was to believe that although he just got $10,000, that his medical, and he was taking this into consideration for my sister for when he passed away. Well, while I was down there about a week ago, he got a letter saying that they were going to raise the insurance $75 a month on him. I don't think that's right. He's pretty upset about it. He paid his dues. He served us, and he served us well. In fact, he said, well, I tell you what, I'll send him a letter and tell him that since I only got 10 grand, the rest of them that had 2 or 3 years got 90 to 110, they can take that $75 out a month out of that money, and when they're paid off, when that's all spent, then he'll start paying it. In other words, what the man's trying to say is he was under the understanding that he'd done this for his family and himself for later in life, and he wants to know why you people are trying to charge him $75 a month now. That's it. Nobody got an answer, huh?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone? That's for something else. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Mr. Starr. Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Starr.
I feel like I should be exempted out from these conversations as they relate because I lived through AO 37. And the idea, I don't say that flippantly because my initial interest in modifying 3.30 and some of the labor terms was to modernize and all of that. And here we are again back dipping into the definitions and the changes. So I don't take it lightly. I'm a little irritated by it. First, I'll ask the question legally, and Ms. Tucker, Mr. Falsey, the question on the substance of AO 37 was, shall the personnel rules be modified to accept changes in personnel rules? We put that in front of the voters, and they said, no, we don't want you to accept these changes as they were proposed by a previous administration. That action by the voters, does it preclude us from getting into 330 again? For other topics? There's a clause in there that references a 2-year moratorium on talking about changes to the section that went in front of the voters.
370, not 330.
Through the chair, I'm pulling up that language now, but my sense is no, it does not, that these are the, in substance, changes that would live in that provision of the code, but are substantively unrelated to those which were put before the voters in AO 37.
Even so, we modified terms and conditions as related to Kelly shift, and some of the very specifics that were in those definitions got changed at the same time 370 was discussed, and 330 now is being discussed, specific to Kelly shift and some of that, even, that's your answer still, is that even because the voters said, no, we don't want you to change the Kelly shift before, now we're changing it a different way, it seems to be acceptable?
Through the chair, I believe that what is before the body now is substantively different from what was referred to the voters and rejected by the voters at the ballot.
I have another question, Madam Chair, if that's okay.
Certainly, Mr. Starr.
And I don't know, Mr. LeBlanc, or I don't know if there's a union representative here, but when you leave the union for promotion to a non-represented position, are you able to go back to the union pretty easily later? I mean, I don't know.
The short answer is no. There's no automatic reentry program for folks. It can and it has happened, but there's no obligation on the part of the employer to replace employees.
So you say not to replace, but if they go to that position and they don't like it, I want to go back. Mr. Hall, Chief Hall, for example, was promoted non-representative and then went back. I don't want to pick on him because he's retired as well.
No, he went back to a non-rep position.
Oh, he did. Okay.
He went from an executive to a non-rep. That has happened several times in recent years at both APD and AFD.
Yeah.
I can think of at least one APD example and two fire examples.
Okay.
And Chief Hall was one of those.
Thank you. One more, and then I'll be finished
Certainly,
here. But
Mr. Starr.
Mr. Falsey, the terms and conditions change in these personnel rules will have likely a direct impact on questions such as I asked, the labor contracts themselves. So are we, by changing this, having a secondary thing of changing the labor contract indirectly?
It's my understanding that we are not.
We're not changing the labor. So my question earlier one about if a person decides that he's leaving the union, I don't have this contract, I've read it prior, but for example, if they decide to go to supervisory, the pay incentives that we're talking about, and particularly for the fire department, the pay incentives are clarified in their contract. We're giving them to them as a non-representative employee, so maybe we need a contract representative here, but what happens if that person decides that they don't want to be a supervisor anymore? Are they out of a job, or do they get to go back? I would think that the contract terms speak to that. And are we changing?
I don't believe, and I'm checking with ER staff, there is no rehire obligation to back into the union represented positions. Someone could apply, and they may well be selected for a vacant position should there be one, but there's no obligation on the part of the employer to place someone back into a position if they are either unsuccessful as or don't enjoy a non-rep position.
Well, don't get me wrong in my line of questioning, because I don't particularly want that to happen. I don't want a fireman or a firefighter that is unhappy with the management challenges to not be able to come back and work for the municipality who's senior, who's trained, we spent a lot of money on him, he's got a great job. So my question is, does the contract itself that's in play prevent a person from leaving employment under the represented position, going away, and does the contract say that? If you don't know, I don't know because I don't have the contract in front of me. I don't want to do something here tonight that precludes us from that and then drives a wedge in there that we've got.
Nothing that we're asking you to do tonight will affect that issue. So if I'm incorrect and the contract does include language in there that, and I'm seeing Karen Turner, Joanne Inglis, and Karen Norsworthy all tell me that it does not, but if that turned out not to be the case, that would not be affected by this ordinance this evening. All we're doing here is changing the compensation for currently 30 positions, split, I believe, almost equally between APD and AFD, and subsequent people that take those positions in the future. It would not affect, if the right to go back into a union represented position exists today. It would also exist tomorrow if this ordinance were to pass. If it doesn't exist now, it won't exist tomorrow either.
Last question is, typically we have the step pay, the dollar amounts in the step pays, the clarification. This isn't a union contract because we're pulling them out in non-reps, but this is the first time I've really seen that we're specifically naming the, in normal terms, Mr. Abbott, we've typically seen the step conversation, step 27 or range 27, 28, 29. In this case, we're actually spelling it out by dollar amount. Why are we doing it that way as opposed to just letting it occur else?
The wages for non-rep, all non-rep positions are set in code. So the only way to adjust non-rep compensation is through a code amendment.
The steps are in code, but is the actual dollar amount specified in code?
Ranges and steps, all of that is laid out in code. You are the ones that set the wages for the non-rep employees.
And we typically just do that by a percentage increase. We don't usually see the dollar amount.
This is what we're proposing to do here is to create 3 new classifications or ranges that are different. But you're absolutely right, Mr. Starr. Typically, there are annual inflationary or CPI-style adjustments to the non-rep wages. That is an authority that is granted in code to the mayor.
Yeah. I'm just choking a little bit on the, is it really a 35% gain for some of these folks that would be motivated to move over?
It varies. There's at least one person that'll take a pay cut in this as a result of this action. The others will gain, they'll see their compensation increase. In some cases, it's significant because of their current relatively low wage. They're not getting more than others in their classification at the end of this, but they're currently being paid quite a bit less than the others in their classification.
Yeah, and so lastly, this is the C that represents a change in that for the 4-year terms of $1.5 million.
Yes, over that period of time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would hope that, during my 2 years on this body, if I've done anything, is I've at least created the impression that I'm somewhat careful with the city's money. I think my voting record speaks to that. And so, looking at spending, a bunch of new money on increasing salaries somewhat dramatically, I think you'd have to agree, is sort of difficult. I was speaking with someone today who just, I think, characterized it well and said the optics of this are bad. We're obviously in a time of economic turbulence, statewide, citywide. People in the private sector are being laid off. Most people in the city are very concerned about their own financial well-being, as well as the cities. They're concerned about the taxes, and yet we're, faced with giving significant raises to people who are making decent money compared to most folks in our city. But the reality is it has to be done. What we're looking at is essentially the labor relations equivalent of deferred maintenance. We've had a collective bargaining failure, if you ask me, in the sense that we've negotiated for several years with our unionized workforce, given them increases over time, but ignored the fact that their supervisors, who are not represented by the union, weren't moving up equally. So that we got to the point over time where now the people that are being supervised are making more than the people doing the supervision. And that is problematic. Nobody would create their own business to operate like that. It's poor management. And it's also creating problems of getting people to take supervisor jobs. We want the very best people on the department to move up and become the supervisors, to manage the departments efficiently and correctly. And we've created such a disincentive that we're not getting that to happen. And so this is the result. I don't think anybody particularly likes it. If there was somebody who had a better way of fixing the problem, I would be all ears. I've heard people say, well, you should lower the salary for the other workers. It's not possible. We have contracts with the unionized workforce. We can't lower their salaries, not that we necessarily would. And it's also important to understand that what we're dealing with tonight is not the issue of whether our public safety employees are paid too much or too little. That's a valid discussion to have. And when their contracts come up for the police and fire, which is not going to be for a couple of years yet, that's a very legitimate discussion. And we should look at comparisons. Are we paying our public safety employees too much compared to other cities? But that discussion occurs down the road. What we're doing here is fixing a systemic management problem. It's a bit costly, but I think it is the best solution, and I'll support it.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, as I read through this, about the effective dates in Section 3, which is on page 5. We've staggered them based on various classifications, and I'm curious as to the reasoning behind that. I frankly would be more comfortable with the final sentence in that section and just the effective date being January 1, but why do we have them staggered here?
Simply put, to defer some of the cost.
Well, and I'll tell you, the most uncomfortable piece of this for me is bumping the fire department's personnel costs mid-year, given that they've come to us, let's see, at least twice and maybe 3 times during my tenure for an end-of-year budget adjustment because they overspent, and I'd hate to see that happen here.
That's why you're not seeing us recommend the battalion chiefs get their raise until 2017. Okay. The 3 assistant chiefs would get theirs effective in 2016. The 12 battalion chiefs would not get theirs until January, and that was one of the key drivers behind that recommendation.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to amend.
Page and what line?
On page 5, lines 4 through 13, replace Section 3 to read, this ordinance shall become effective on January 1, or shall be effective January 1, 2017.
Second.
There are several folks in the queue. Are your comments on this amendment?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, let's vote on Mr. Flynn's amendment.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Abbott?
If possible, we'd like to recommend that the Assembly consider the challenges that we're currently facing in recruiting for police lieutenants specifically, and that we expect to have as we fill battalion chief positions this year as well. We're not confident that we can attract folks to those internal candidates to those positions, sergeants in the case of police lieutenants and fire captains in the case of battalion chiefs. We've already tried and failed to attract internal candidates in that way. We're currently looking at 2 current vacancies and potentially as many as 4 or 5 vacancies in lieutenant ranks, and at least 2 to 3 vacancies in the chief ranks at the fire department. It'd be our respectful request that we be able to move forward with this pay scale as proposed. Understand the fiscal challenge. That's the rationale behind our initial proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Ms. Zimboski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Mr. Abbott's point, if we're talking about a carrot, which in fact some of these people are getting $30,000 to $40,000 raises, numerous of them are these positions. The fact that the Assembly passes it and it's effective January, people will apply for these positions, in my opinion, knowing they're going to get a huge, huge raise in January. So I think the fact that if the Assembly were to take action on this item, even if the effective date is January 1, I don't think that will be a deterrent for people applying. I think people obviously are very in tune to what's being discussed right now, and that is a huge financial incentive, even if it is deferred for 6 months. So I would still support Mr. Flynn's amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Zimboski.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Abbott.
If I could respond, the issue is not the salaries of the current people. The people that will be taking these jobs, if they are in fact internal candidates, the captains and senior captains at fire and the sergeants at police, they'll be taking pay cuts, even at the new schedule rate. So our interest is in minimizing the impact on the folks that will be applying for these positions. The people that are applying for these positions are almost certainly making $20,000 to $30,000 at least more in their current positions than they will even under this ordinance. They'll see an increase in their base pay, but they will not see an increase in their actual compensation because of other compensation that they're eligible for as sergeants or fire captains. So the challenge is not the issue of what's going to happen to the people that are getting raises. They're already in those positions. They're not going to have to reapply for them under this program. The issue is we're trying to recruit into those positions, and that's the challenge we're facing, and that's why we believe that the immediate effective date for APD and the split effective date for AFD is important.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Mr. Trainee.
Chiefs, come on forward for a second, both of you. You first, police chief, and explain the problem that we've got with the police department, and chief, you'd explain the problem we've got in the fire department. You guys are the ones that are dealing with this. We're not. And before we vote, I want to know from your perspective the problem we've got out there. I've been told that you can't even get people to put in for these jobs. It may look more professional or more in advance, but they're taking the pay decrease.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee. Yes.
Could you get the microphone so we can hear you?
We have 6 vacant lieutenant spots right now, and at the beginning of the year, we looked to fill those spots, and we were unsuccessful to have any candidates because it is a substantial pay cut, not just for the officer, but for their family that they support.
Of the 6, did you have at least 6 people you knew that were qualified, but you just didn't want to put in for it because it was a decrease?
That's correct.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you,
Chief,
Mr. Trainee.
what's the fire department looking like?
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, we have the same problem. If you're wanting to advance and take on greater accountability, we actually have to cajole the people to do that. They don't do it for financial incentives. And as people get later in their career, they're looking to build a retirement, not to decrease from it. So we actually had to strike an agreement with one individual that we would resolve this issue within a year, and if not, he would be able to revert back to a battalion chief position.
Okay, you've heard Mr. Flynn's amendment. Can you give me your take on that amendment, how it changes this? Does it put this in danger of not being the item that we need to induce people to put in for this promotion?
The schedule that's before you is the most optimum schedule. We've worked with the city management. We've worked with the Office of Management and Budget. We can finance this schedule, and it moves the ball along. This problem existed when I was city manager, 2003 through 2007, and I am thrilled that this body and the administration is trying to correct a wrong. I can still remember the day when we're talking to prior Sergeant Rob Hune and trying to ask him to become a deputy chief of the police department and take about a $30,000 a year pay cut. It's time for this to be fixed.
Thank you, Chief. So I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Flynn's amendment, I don't see anyone else. Mr. Evans? Can we fix this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly on this, I think you can look at the glass as being half full or half empty. And we're kind of focusing on how much we're going to save in this next 6 months. I'm kind of a positive guy, so I think one of the things to keep in mind is actually the millions probably that the city has actually saved over the last several years by underpaying their non-reps in this area. Basically, we've kind of, yeah, how you look at it, but it's clear that this is a problem. It's a problem now. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me not to fix the problem now that we've realized it, now that it's on the table. It's sort of penny wise and pound foolish to kick this down to January, given the problems we're having. We've benefited from this in a weird way for a long time. It's time to fix the system, be smart about it, manage the departments the way they should be managed, and so I'll be against the Mr. Flynn's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Dombrowski on Mr. Flynn's amendment? No? Mr. Steele on Mr. Flynn's amendment? Okay, Mr. Abbott spoke already. Mr. Evans spoke already. Okay, there's no one else in the queue. I'm sorry. We're having issues here. It's really not,
Okay,
you know.
so-
Anyway, Mr. Weddleton.
Well, I had a question for maybe Mr. Abbott or the chiefs. If someone is an acting lieutenant, are they paid under the non-rep rate, or are they paid at whatever their prior position was? Because we have a few acting lieutenants.
They're not paid as the non-rep rate. I'm going to need somebody that's making unintelligible hand gestures to actually come up to the microphone and answer the question.
No, it's not EPF employee.
Through the chair.
And you are?
Karen Norsworthy with Employee Relations. They get their sergeant, if a sergeant is acting for a lieutenant, they get their sergeant wage plus 5% on top of it.
Okay, so they're making more than they would if they had taken the promotion. Is that
Correct.
So is it a hard
Quite a
time?
bit more.
Is it a hard time getting people to take the position of acting lieutenant?
No.
Do they do the same work as a lieutenant?
The police chief would have to answer that.
Close. Apologize, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Are you done with me?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
But to be clear, so when someone's in an acting position, they make their current wage, which in the case of a police sergeant far exceeds the lieutenant's wage, and then they get 5% of their sergeant's wage as they're acting as a lieutenant as well.
So is it cheaper to make him a lieutenant?
Absolutely.
Anything else, Mr. Weddleton?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be voting against this amendment. As uncomfortable it is for this body, we're in this position to make these decisions. We need to right this wrong that's occurring now, because we've got qualified people that don't put in for the job, which makes no sense. We need to correct this problem. And earlier, one of our colleagues was talking about where we had to make an increase in the fire department year-end budget. That was because of a leave issue. Remember the last administration, they ended up with an extra week of leave, and they ended up taking that leave. And we had to make up that money, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. There's no one else in the queue. I just have a comment, not debate. Mr. Flynn, I really appreciate you bringing forward your motion and your amendment. And at first, I thought that it was an okay idea, and I'm glad that I had an opportunity to listen to the debate, because, frankly, I believe that your proposed amendment circumvents, to some extent, the whole purpose of this ordinance. With that said, I'll be voting no. It's time for us to vote. Mr. Flynn's amendment to change the effective date to January 1st, 2017, correct, Mr. Flynn?
Yes, effective January 1, 2017.
Thank you. Please vote. That fails 4-7. We're now on the main motion.
Need a motion on it, or we've already?
I think we have a motion already. Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up with Mr. Abbott on a couple of lines of questioning that Mr. Starr had. As I'm looking at, I can only speak to the fire department because it's what I know best, but as I'm looking at potentially people leaving the union and going to senior level management, that would be above senior captain, so it'd be battalion chief, assistant chief, chief.
Correct. Those are the two positions that would be, whose compensation would be changed in this ordinance.
Right. And with that said, if someone were to go back into the union, effectively they would have to be taking a demotion, likely from battalion chief down to either senior captain or something else.
As I said before, there's no obligation that be the case. It would be up to the department to decide.
That's not really my question. I'm just trying to clarify that that's exactly what it is. It would be you'd be going into a position that's senior captain or lower. But my question is actually the only time we would really see this where somebody might have a forced reentry. What does the contract, and Karen, maybe you can answer this, but what does the contract look like when we institute bump rates? Because effectively what we're looking at is potential, effectively if you can't fund your budget and you end up having to cut people. What does that look like when somebody is a senior level or non-rep? Do they have bump rates to get back into the union? Okay. Well, that answers that question. That was truly a question I just didn't know. Thank you. My other question is, what other avenues has the administration explored in order to incentivize employees to taking some of these positions?
Well, our incentivizing options are pretty limited. The non-rep pay schedule and the other compensation elements are fixed in code, so we don't have a lot of traditional employment incentives to offer.
Mr. Abbott, with all due respect, that's really not an adequate answer. We're changing the code right now to incentivize. So my question still stands. If we're changing the code in this direction to incentivize people to take the jobs, was there any discussion or thought into other avenues in which the code may have been changed in order to incentivize employees to potentially take these senior level positions?
I apologize. I misunderstood your question. In conversations with potential candidates for both police lieutenants and battalion chiefs and assistant chiefs, we determined that by far the most important issue was to resolve the issue of compensation. So that's where we focused our efforts.
Was there any discussion, Mr. Abbott, about the impediments or the ability to utilize, I know what the impediments are, but did anybody talk about retire, rehire? And I know we did away with that a while back, but has anybody brought that up?
No, we were not. We're not considering retire, rehire options at this time. And most of the candidates aren't members of the police and fire retirement system. So I believe almost all of I don't know that there are any active police and fire retirement system members. I'm not sure how many people there are still that could retire, rehire.
Well, I can think of at least 3 off the top of my head that are currently AFD members that are retire, rehires.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
But my point is, oftentimes we're limiting our employment pool because we're only looking at the current pool that's actively there now. Where if you were to institute some sort of mechanism to allow the ones that maybe retired not too long ago to come back, they are already pulling their pension, they're already retired, they might be willing to work for a much lower wage. And in fact, that was kind of sometimes the carrot in order to get people to come back.
And we, APD, when they posted for lieutenants recently, there were external candidates. It was open to external candidates as well. I don't know about fire, but there are currently avenues for former employees to apply for any of these positions.
Yeah, and again, that's part of the challenge. The way the current law is, the retirees know right now they can't pull their pension and come back to work for the city. But if we were to explore those options...
Oh, do you mean PERS?
Yeah. That's
well, that's state law.
Yeah.
We can't There's nothing we can do.
There's never a we can't. Sometimes we have to work collaboratively with others, but that's my question, is if it was explored at all.
No, we did not consider changing state law.
Okay, well, we can't change state law, but we can certainly talk about it. Was there any discussion about maybe creating additional flexibility or leave incentives?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Abbott. I appreciate your comments. I'll just be very candid. You know, Mr. Evans, this is far beyond the optics look bad. The fact of the matter is, when I pull out this spreadsheet, you can list one person, I think, who takes maybe a $1,000 pay cut. There's a significant amount of people that are taking $30,000, $40,000 pay increases, and that is significant. And whether it's because these people have been underpaid or whether it's been because we have so quickly escalated the other pay of employees, I don't know what that is, but I can tell you this has started to be dealt with. Initially, it was probably a year and a half. I'm trying to think. It was probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I actually brought forward an ordinance to rectify some of what the battalion chiefs were dealing with. And in response, frankly, it was in part because I thought what was coming out of the previous administration was unfair when it came to overtime rules. And so I think at that time, if memory serves, I think we created an extra 2 steps at that time. I'm trying to remember. I think it was an additional 2 steps for battalion chiefs specifically. And so this has been something that it hasn't been that nobody has looked at it. This body actually did rectify that a couple years ago. But the fact is, when you looked at the numbers, it was way too big of a hurdle to jump and add all these extra steps back, to add a huge, I mean, come on. Honestly, we're acting like we're in a vacuum, and reality isn't happening around us. This is not just a one-time cost. Right now, the fiscal note's $840,000, but this is in perpetuity. It's forever. And I think it's the same reason I wouldn't vote for a $25,000 municipal money going towards a piano. Sorry. The fact of the matter is, reality is happening around us. We have a number of people in our district, and I'm sure throughout the municipality of Anchorage, that have lost their jobs in the last 3 weeks. Taxpayers have to foot the bill for this. And I can't, in good conscience, I think this is too much, too fast. I think it's been clearly demonstrated that the administration has not explored any other option for creatively trying to incentivize the workforce in order to take these types of jobs. It's definitely an issue. I've seen an assistant chief job at the fire department probably be vacant for 3 years now that I could probably think of. There's definitely a thing, but part of this is leadership. And we have not utilized all the tools and all the relationships that we have in order to properly incentivize within the means we have. And so I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, for one, want to applaud the administration for taking on the effort. When the administration changed, and long before it changed, we knew we had problems with regards to recruitment and retention. And it's only gotten worse in terms of upper level. You've got to fill those upper level ranks so that the folks as they're coming up have a place to go. And that's, unless you're going to broaden out, supervise more people, and I think we're probably pretty broad in that regard, but we've got to be able to recruit folks in. It's got to be a career path. And so I applaud what you're doing. There may be some nuances in here, and certainly the cost is staggering, but it's reflective of us having our head in the sand for a number of years. I think we've got to make the changes, and I hope we do due diligence in terms of what it looks like long term when we get the ranks filled out in terms of cost, because we are spending a lot of money. But to me, police and fire are critical elements that need to be funded, need to be staffed appropriately, and I'll be one in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I voted for Mr. Flynn's amendment because, like many of us, I saw the price tag here and thought, that's very significant. And I agreed with Ms. Domboski that I thought that we could probably incentivize these changes or these people to apply for these positions even if the start date was January 1st. That being said, I want to applaud Mr. Evans for his summation of the information we received about this issue. And I think this is, given the kind of comments that we have received from the public, I think this is a case where the administration did a very good job of briefing us at the Public Safety Committee about why our current system is not working. And unfortunately, we all did perhaps a suboptimal job of communicating that to the public. And I'll just speak a little bit on the police side, because that's something I care a lot about in East Anchorage, and I've tried to build a relationship with the department. It's clear that it is extremely difficult to fill these lieutenant and captain positions. And just coming at it from the Army perspective, for example, you're not going to get anyone to go green to gold and become an officer if you have to take a massive pay cut when you do it. So again, I agree with Mr. Evans. We all want to be seen as fiscal conservatives, and we all want to be fiscal conservatives, but in this case, we would be remiss if we did not fix the problem. And I want to speak to what Ms. Domboski said. She said, reality is happening around us. Well, the reality is, at least at the police department, it's extremely difficult to recruit and retain people. It's also difficult to get them to apply for these positions. That's why we have acting lieutenants instead of actual lieutenants. So I think we need to accept reality, be competitive with other cities that are trying to hire away our police officers, and pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Starr.
These comments are accusatory, and I apologize in advance, Mr. Mayor, for that, but we've just come off really fleshing out first quarter budget reviews. We have still been undecided as to how we're going to give surpluses back to those that pay taxes. And one meeting after we did all of those heavy discussions and modified that, then there's sort of a new epiphany policy that we better correct this. And so we normally have budget conversations that talk the whole operation of the city. And now one meeting after we approve the budget and raise the taxes, we're growing the budget again. And to me, it just doesn't send a good signal that we know what we're doing, especially on our side. If it was a priority or such a big crisis, Mr. Trainee, why didn't you move an amendment? Or all these other conversations that, the sky is falling tonight, we got to fix this because this can't happen, has just now started occurring. Mr. LeBlanc, I worked with him years ago and he didn't bring it up. It's time to, to be accountable to the budget conversations and that as much as it is to those that are there. I work hard at establishing the overall budget conversations in the Balancing Act, and it says on the SE on page 702, that the Anchorage Municipal Code 3.30 change increases. This increases our direct labor costs, an average of 3.5 annually for the general government fund. The whole thing. That's a big number to all of a sudden surprise. May 10th, we read it, and we're acting on it on May 24th. Wow. It's just, again, they were offensive, but it's not the proactive way that I do business in a full disclosure manner, because we're going to do things with the surplus. We've just grown the budget. You're going to come third quarter, fourth quarter and say, well, remember when you raised the police salaries and you did all this other stuff? Now we only have $6 million left to give back to those that we sort of promised. And it's a tough way to do business. And I don't fall on deaf ears, Mr. Flynn, with your comments about the many times that they've came to us. And I say many because it's been more than 2. It's been 3 that we just can't seem to stay on budget for some reason or another. So I can't support it. It's not a matter of not supporting the people that work here, but it's just too much, and I think we have accountability to others. So thank you for letting me do my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Weddleton?
I will be supporting it, and I'd heard about this problem when I was doing the Citizens Police Academy this fall, and so when I started flipping through this, it was a familiar need. Then I saw the dollars and was absolutely staggered by it. So I checked the math. And one thing, I think that 3.5% is not the general budget. It means something different than it seems to read. But the numbers are huge. But here this evening, at the end of the day, we have to pay market rate to get the people that we need. And if we've got long-term vacancies in these positions, and we're hiring from within and trying to hire from without, and we're not filling them, it tells me that we need to raise the wages. And it is a huge amount of money, but it sounds like it's something that definitely needs to be done. So I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. There's no one else in the queue. I just have a comment to the administration. In terms of incentives, did you think about Hawaii or maybe a trip to a new car or something? Anyway, I'm just kidding. But I will be supporting this ordinance because it just simply makes sense. It's something that we need to do. Public safety is of major importance right now, and our constituents are letting us know how insecure they feel with not having enough police officers on the street. There's no one else in the queue. Let's vote. That was... it needs to be reset, correct, Madam Clerk? There's an issue with the equipment. Is it A2? Is it A2? 7, 8 to 3. Thank you, Madam Clerk. That was approved 8 to 3. Oh. Okay, we are now on agenda item 14K, AO 2016-38, an ordinance amending Code Title 15, Environmental Protection, to amend the provisions related to housing maintenance and occupancy code. Before I open the public hearing, I just want to remind folks that earlier in the meeting I mentioned the fact that there is a brand new document being drafted right now, and we're going to continue the public hearing so that we can give the public an opportunity to see what the new ordinance has to say. With that said, public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Please come up front, state your name and spell your last. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Carrie Jackson, Jackson. My family and I live across the street from a property that contains a dilapidated cabin along with several abandoned motorhomes and vehicles. All of the structures have been deemed uninhabitable by the municipality. This property and cabin have no electricity, no gas, no water or sewage. Garbage has been piled up in various places, including in the abandoned vehicles. Despite this, since we moved into our house in 2009, and presumably before this, there has been a constant transient population living in and around these structures. Sometimes up to 10 people have occupied the uninhabitable structures, including the abandoned vehicles. We've witnessed people going to the bathroom outside and disposing of human waste along with other criminal activity on this property. Over the last 7 years, we've consistently contacted various organizations for help, including the noise control, code enforcement, the ombudsman, the police, the fire department. Recently, we've been in contact with the Huffman Community Council, CAP, and Mr. Weddleton, our assemblyman. All of the organizations and people that I've described have agreed that this property has been a problem for years. However, despite everyone's best efforts, the owner of this property and the people living on this property have not maintained even the minimum standards stated in the current ordinance. And while the people who live there and the owner don't seem to mind these living conditions, it affects the property, neighbors, and businesses such as the Learning Farm, which has children witnessing this activity on nearly a daily basis. I would please ask the Assembly to approve any amendments to help address these problems, not only for the safety of those who choose to live on this property, but also for the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. There's no one in the queue. Appreciate you being here this evening. Anyone else wish to be heard? Come on down. State your name and spell your last. Welcome.
My name is Jane Straight, S-T-R-A-I-G-H-T. I live in Muldoon. I've lived there for the best part of the last 25 years. I'm a property owner, and I'm also a landlord. I want to commend you guys for taking on revising this ordinance. It's something that sorely needs to be done. I think that with the housing affordability problems that we face in our community, one of the pieces of that we don't often speak about is preserving the quality of the affordable housing stock that we have. And I hate to hear stories like this last one, and I've seen things like that in our neighborhood as well. Code enforcement is a great tool in our toolbox to preserve the value of residential property in this community. I have one little bone to pick with this revised ordinance. Something I suggest that you take on has to do with garbage. One of our rental properties is a multifamily property where we provide a dumpster for our tenants. We provide refuse pickup for our tenants at all of our properties. And we recently acquired this property, and so I've been surprised to learn that many landlords do not do this. And so I have had to resort to locking this dumpster because I see people walking and driving from other properties where landlords are not picking up garbage and putting garbage in the dumpster that I provide for my tenants. So if you were to look at page 12, item C, there's a section on page 12 called Responsibilities of Owners. And it says, or proposes that it would say, every owner shall provide and maintain appropriate receptacles and conveniences for the removal of ashes, garbage, rubbish, and other waste incidental to the occupancy of the dwelling unit and arrange for their removal. Yay. And then it says, unless otherwise provided by rental or lease agreement, and that's the problem. I would recommend you strike unless otherwise provided by lease agreement. It's my belief with the price of rental housing in our community and the fact that we're this far into the 21st century and as big of a city as we are, landlords should be required to provide for trash removal. I've researched this, and it turns out it's a common practice in most other cities. I don't think it's reasonable to expect tenants to pick up their own trash to pay for their own garbage removal, and in many, many cases, they can't afford to do it, and they won't. And so I would suggest that you make that little fix. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar, you have a question for this?
Yes. Actually, just a comment. Ms. Straight, I just wanted to, first of all, it's nice to see a fellow Muldooner. But second, I just wanted to commend you as an owner for stepping up and sort of expressing that you think owners should take more responsibility on this garbage issue. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening, sir. Please state your name, spell your last.
Hi, my name is Byrne Davis, D-A-V-I-S. I'd like to oppose Section 15.10.160, Sections A and D. I believe this violates the Open Records Law of AMC 3, Chapter 9.3.90. It also may not pass the sniff test of the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Open is good. I have the unfortunate position of dealing with rental properties, and try as we might, we get some real rascals in there. We do our best. We look at their credit, their work history, and their criminal, and we still get some really bad outcomes. There are people who do not fix their buildings, and those people should definitely be held accountable for that. We work very hard to keep our buildings in top shape, but another layer such as this is going to just compound the problems. We really need open transparency so that we don't have nuisance complaints from tenants who are either evicted or pushed out for whatever reason, and then not be able to face their accuser. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comment, and as mentioned earlier, this ordinance is being rewritten, so the changes that you recommend may very well be one of the changes, but I want to let you know, and everybody else here who are here on this subject, that you're going to have a copy of the new ordinance as soon as it's available, and I'm also going to have a work session. Don't know when yet, but we're going to have a work session to talk about this before we address it at an official assembly meeting, so I want to let you know that, and thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Public hearing is continued. Mr.
Madam
Trainer?
Chair, move to continue this public hearing to June 21st, 2016.
Second, please. Thank you. Please vote. Right, continue public hearing. Right. Somebody didn't vote. Hello.
Let's see, who was that?
Thank you. That will be continued to the meeting of June 21st. We are now at agenda item 14L, L 2016-51, rezoning of Block 1, Block 2, Benson subdivision. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wish to be heard? Anyone wish to be heard? Are you here to testify in this, sir? Please come to the podium. State your name, spell your last.
Madam Chair, my name is Steve Agnew. I am representing the applicant, the owners of the property, Mr. Richter and his wife, Catherine. I have a few handouts I would like to share with you this evening. May I?
You can give them to the clerk. She'll pass them to us. Thank you. Do we set them? Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Richter agree with the recommendations of the Commission adopting this amendment to the zoning map submitted here tonight. This rezone reflects a successful process commenced in the late 1980s with the Spenard redevelopment plan that has occurred along Spenard Road, particularly the area south of the railroad right-of-way down to the Lake Hood area and, of course, adjacent to the International Airport. This body has found it fit 11 times since the adoption of the Spenard redevelopment plan to implement that plan with rezone amendments. And this property, as found by the Planning Commission, clearly fits the criteria in the comprehensive plan and in the Spenard redevelopment plan, and we request your concurrence with that tonight. And so I'm going to reserve my time, and if you have any more questions or if there's opportunity for rebuttal, we'll appreciate time for additional comment.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Croft has a question. Mr. Croft.
Yes, sir.
See you again. So this is just the triangular parcel?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It's the parcel A. Planning felt it was best to submit tonight the parcel that the Planning Commission did give an affirmative vote on. The second parcel, parcel B, will be addressed sometime in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Steele.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. I thought we were still dealing with both parcels, but the A, I don't have any problem with. I think it's a good by everything, by the plans, by the zoning, by use around it, a good use of that particular piece of property. I did not ask you in the past whether or not you had talked to the property owners that are beyond parcel, the second parcel. Have you dealt with those, the property owners at all to get their opinions?
We have reached out to some of the owners it would be to the east, to the opposite side away from Spenard Road. The one gentleman, Mr. Fejes, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, Fejes, he wrote us a letter of support. There was another gentleman down the street who, in fact, opposed, and that was, I believe, the gentleman who lives at the very end of the cul-de-sac.
That's the only question I had with regards to this one. I think that that the first parcel is a good use. The second one, I have some qualms about it, but ultimately that may be the appropriate use as well. But let's give it a little time and see what folks have to say about it out in the community as well.
We've commenced further in-depth planning efforts with with staff. There is a land use map amendment in some form of draft at this time, and we're going to work with staff. I believe that would be Mr. Tobish on working on that plan.
Can I ask another one?
Certainly.
We had chatted about flight path. Is there restricted height on that particular parcel?
Well,
any of those?
Madam Chair, Mr. Steele, yes, there is a restrictive height. Economically, it's not so much a restriction on this property, but the more important issue is in the packet at pages 28 through 30. They talk about noise impact on this property because it's directly below the flight path to Lake Hood. And in that regard, I think there's a very strong argument that it's not suited to residential, but it is suited to some form of productive, commercial use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Thank you, sir. No one else is in the queue. Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Good evening.
My name is Margaret Auth, A-U-T-H. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Assembly, for this opportunity to speak to this issue. I'm a 29-year resident of real close to this piece of property. The Spenard Community Council voted 17-1 against this. For good reason. We in Spenard have watched death by 1,000 cuts of residential land along Spenard Road and close to Spenard Road. I worked on the West Anchorage District Plan, and I know exactly what we worked on, which is to maintain the integrity of the neighborhoods of Spenard. It's been an uphill battle, and I find it interesting that Mr. Agnew brought that up, that there's been 11 rezones. That's exactly our point. The rezones are mostly parking lots and car lots, and that's not the highest and best use on what is a really good traffic corridor that serves the community, that serves the airport, that could take workers to and from close nearby business areas at the end of Spenard Road and at the airport. At the airport. So it's distressing to us to see this to happen over and over and over again, even though it's a very small property, that the intention is to rezone the one behind it. And this has happened again and again on Spenard Road, where it's first that, and then it's the next one behind it, and we're seeing it etch away at the residents and the integrity of the residential area behind there. The other thing that I'd like to point out is Mr. Agnew points out in his packet that there is no undeveloped land along Spenard Road. I find it really curious that he would say that, considering that one block to the north is a piece of property that was rezoned per the request of Mr. Agnew 2 years ago that is sitting vacant with cyclone fencing around it. So that's a distressing thing to the Community Council, because we were sold that that was going to be developed imminently, and it was needed right away for rezone, and a project was going to go through. this is what's frustrating. We're trying to maintain a healthy commercial area, and we're also trying to maintain the residential integrity. I'm asking this body to please consider that the planning department is very soon going to be doing work on the Spenard corridor plan, and that's going to be taking all of this into where they want to project it into the future. I really think that right now their plans do not include any really kind of development. It's speculative, and the only thing they're promising us is that they're not going to put in drive-in theaters or heliports or erotic material sales. And that's not really helping the community make these decisions. So,
Excuse me, ma'am. Are you representing the community council or yourself?
The community council.
Okay, so you get 2 more minutes.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's really, what they are asking is that they have this rezone, and when the market forces are in favor, they will do something like mixed housing, mixed use. But the problem is they also don't say what they're going to be doing in the interim, and we also don't know how long this economic instability that we're experiencing right now in Anchorage is going to last. Are we talking about another parking lot, another airport parking lot for the next 10 years, or whenever things are going to get better? So we're asking this body to please hold off on this. Mr. Richter was well aware of what the zoning was when he bought it. He bought the land in the 2000s, and so he knew what it was zoned. And we're just asking to slow this down, because we're racing towards still more instability with our residential land stock in Spenard.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton has a question. Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. What we see here is that this actually seems to match the plans that would apply here. Did you find that changing it to B3 does not match the plans?
Well, not particularly. I mean, when you look at the Spenard, and it's not the Spenard redevelopment, it's the Spenard Commercial District Development Strategy. And when you look at that, there are hatch marks for what can possibly be rezoned and what might be more ideal. The problem is that if this piece of property is rezoned to B3, they almost can't operate unless they turn the lot behind them into parking, because the piece of property is so tiny that the only way that they can make it commercially viable is to rezone the property behind them. So that's our problem, is, again, seeing it going further into the neighborhoods.
So you mean that block B, parcel B, that is not being rezoned?
Which is precisely why staff came out against that at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Croft.
Yeah, hi, Peggy. I was at that Spenard Community Council, and I wanted to check my recollection. That extending the B back into the neighborhoods, taking over the residential, it was my recollection that was the main concern of the Community Council at that time.
Yes. And the way that it seems, even per Mr. Agnee's previous comments, is that the B will be coming up, and it's because they need the parking behind them. There's no way that they could put a building and parking in that and make it commercially viable.
The primary concern is not so much this as what comes next.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Thank you. There's no one else in the queue.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Welcome.
My name is Robert Oth, longtime Spenard resident, former chair of the Community Council many times over, but I'm speaking for myself. This property is in a transition area, and I brought the Spenard Road District Development Strategy to show that the Planning Department and the Planning and Zoning Commission sort of equate transition equals rezone. That's not what the strategy says. There's actually 3 distinctions. One is property we want rezoned, property we don't want rezoned, and a maybe category in the middle, and that's what transition. This category is in the maybe category, not automatic rezone. And it says, I'm reading from it, while expansion of the commercial district is proposed in some instances and no change is anticipated in others, bans on both sides of the district plan or the district are identified as transition areas. And on page 19 of the packet, it identifies transition areas as areas of potential commercial district expansion. And proposals are to be considered on a case-by-case basis and their own merits. So what does that mean? There has to be a proposal to be considered on its own merits. What is the proposal? There is no proposal. This is 100% speculative rezone in a property where the plan says you have to look at the proposal and decide on a case-by-case basis whether a rezone should be done. This is a property that has almost no frontage on Spenard Road. It's triangular shaped. The tip of the triangle is what faces Spenard Road. All the frontage is on Breezewood, and then the other property will come. I don't know how this is going to be developed with Spenard Road frontage, but the plan says not to develop where you cannot get Spenard Road frontage. I'm reading from the plan. The committee's intent is clearly neither to encourage a continuous uniform expansion of the commercial district nor, except in certain cases noted, to encourage new businesses that would not front on Spenard Road. And so they're looking to create business opportunities oriented towards Spenard Road. And all the council wanted to know is, what's the proposal? We'll look at it. We'll consider it. What is the proposal? There was no proposal. That's why the council voted against it. How can a rezone be adopted on a case-by-case basis based on the strength of the proposal when there is no proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are no questions. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Public hearing is closed. What is the wish of the body? Is there going to be a motion to approve? Or
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Dombowski.
Second.
I don't know. Who was the second?
I was.
Mr. Steele. Ms. Dombowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the administration. This is the first time I'm hearing the Spenard Road strategy be referenced. Is this a document that has, like a plan, has been adopted by the Assembly?
Through the chair, Ms. Dombowski, Erica McConnell with the Office of Economic and Community Development. Yes, the Spenard Commercial District Development Strategy is an element of the comprehensive plan. It was adopted in 1986.
Okay, a little bit before my time. Ms. McConnell, since I have you there, it's my understanding, it looks like the controversial part is obviously this parcel B, but planning and zoning did agree that parcel A, they were supportive of parcel A being rezoned.
That's correct.
Okay. And is parcel B, do you know the status of that? Is there something before P&Z right now on parcel B?
So the two parcels came together in one rezone request. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval for parcel A and denial for parcel B. The applicants have filed a request to bring the recommendation of denial to the Assembly for consideration, and that will be before you soon.
Okay, so that is something we're going to be seeing. It's not just speculation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dombowski. Mr. Croft.
Erica, I didn't want you to run off. I have a question when you get a minute. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that appreciate the authors being here, appreciate the community council effort. That comports with what I heard, that the A parcel was a concern primarily as it led to further intrusion into the residential and further away from facing onto Spenard Road. And a lot of the concerns that were expressed here, I expressed to the developer. So I expect to see when we have the B parcels before us that there be a plan that the community can actually understand what is going to be built there. That's what the Community Council reasonably requested, and it's going to be important as we stage that next portion. Well, Mr. Roth is right that it has very little frontage, triangle points on it. It's really, in my opinion, associated with that that square lot. It's more that corner of Breezewood, Valleywood, and Spenard, and for that reason, and I think that's why P&Z approved it, I'll support it. But I'm very skeptical of further intrusions into residential, and very skeptical of the next phase, and would want to see a lot more meat on the bones of what's going to be put there.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Mr. Starr had a question for Ms. McConnell. Mr. Starr.
I just need clarification. Never mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Steele. Thank you, Ms. McConnell.
Yeah.
There are no other questions. Thank you. Mr. Steele.
I'm fine.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you. I think Mr. Starr may have asked the question that I wanted to start with, which is parcel B? Is it the one that says existing B3 directly north of this parcel A, or is it the one to the east
North.
with the house on it?
It has a house.
Mr. Flynn, through the chair, parcel B would be to the east.
Okay.
The existing B3 is the parcel that adjoins the triangle that we have labeled A.
This one right here, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And I'm glad you're up here because I have a couple questions. I was looking at, for example, the site design standards. It says all buildings shall be set back not less than 20 feet from an adjacent residentially zoned lot or property. Do you interpret that to mean vertical construction, horizontal construction, or both?
Both.
So parking lot, for example, couldn't be within 20 feet of residential.
I'm sorry. I understand the special limitation to be buildings.
Yes.
I believe that's written as buildings.
It says all building. So to me,
Building in the definition of a vertical improvement, yes, sir.
Okay, so you consider it to be vertical only.
Spenard Road.
Okay, and then it speaks to illuminated signs are limited to the Spenard Road frontage. I see no Spenard Road frontage.
Well, that would be in conjunction with the existing B3.
Is your ownership group in control of the existing B3
Yes,
property?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. That's all the questions I had for you.
Anything else, Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, just I understand Mr. Croft's comment that this is not necessarily an unreasonable step to take, but if ultimately the goal is to rezone both this parcel and the one to the east, I'd be more comfortable considering them in conjunction as opposed to independently. That's almost like spot zoning, that bad old thing. So I guess I did have a question for Erica. Do you have a rough estimate for when we should expect to see the appeal of the denial of the rezone for parcel B?
I believe we're trying to get it on the next agenda.
So it would be at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Given that, Madam Chair, I'll move to postpone consideration of this item to our meeting on May 10 so we can hear these in concert.
May 10th?
May 10, yes. Or sorry, it's May 24. June 7. June 7.
Is there a second?
I think the petitioner wants to address that.
Madam Chair, we do not know that we are going to bring that appeal forward. We're working with planning staff now to understand the status of the amendment, or rather the redrafting of the land use plan. And it may be that this has to come forward after that land use plan is redone.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
I think a couple points. One, for clarity, is the parcel B is east of the existing B3.
Yep.
Okay, you got that. Okay, good. I would have opposed this, but since they have control, excuse me, of the existing B3, if they were to replat that into one, that would actually make it all work better. That weird shape, 10,000 square feet, would be really hard to develop as B3 and also even as a home. But it could be used very well as part of the other, the existing B3. So I would tend to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Dombowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Weddleton just hit upon where I was going to go. I look at this and I do have a question. If the attorney would come back up. I'm sorry, sir, I forgot your name. I apologize.
Mr. Steve Agnew.
Mr. Agnew. My question to you is this. If in fact an appeal does come to this body for a parcel B that everyone's referring to and it's denied by this body, do you have a contingency plan for what you're going to do with those parcels?
Well, first off, the two parcels together are about 34,000 square feet, the existing B3 and the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
That is a viable piece of property. It's not the ideal piece of property, but 34,000 square feet could support decent, commercial development. The owner would like to do a larger development, and that's why the original application included the parcel B. The comment a moment ago about the platting would be an appropriate condition that upon the successful, the adoption of this map amendment, that they would be platted together. And finally, presently, there is a office on the existing B3 and a dwelling, so it's not like it's a vacant yard that's collecting trash.
Okay, thank you. With that said, I think I understand where Mr. Flynn's going, trying to. I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
Sorry, Ms. Dombowski. I was telling Mr. Agnew that there are no more questions. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Dombowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I look at this, I think there definitely are options for the petitioner should they decide, as they've indicated, they're not even sure they're going to actually go forward with the appeal. I don't have a problem deciding this issue tonight on parcel A. I think I could see looking at them both at the same time, but especially considering the petitioner doesn't even know if they're going to go through with an appeal, I won't be supporting the amendment. And while I'm at it, I'll just say that I will vote for the rezone tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Dombowski. There's a motion on the floor to postpone action until the meeting of June 7th. There is no one in the queue. Please vote. That passes. Do we need to revote?
It happened to anybody, Pete. Don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah. It happens to all of us. Do we need to reset the vote? Thank you, Madam Clerk. No, it's a motion to postpone action until the meeting of June 7th, brought forward by Mr. Flynn. Please vote. That passes 7-4. This will be postponed until the meeting of June 7th. We are now down to special orders. There was a laid on the table item brought forward by Mr. Starr. Mr. Starr.
Well, I want to be clear that I make a motion to sort of, I'm giving notice that we're going to make a motion. There's no assembly action required tonight, so some of the new members may not know where I'm headed with this. So by getting it into our queue, it already makes the agenda for next week. So I put it on the table late, but I'm not asking for action tonight. It does deal with the topic downtown, AK Alchemist, that we need to procedurally correct some things, and that's my intention in making this motion.
Thank you, Mr.
Starr. I intend to make the other motion which you saw at the meeting of the 7th.
Right, Mr. Starr. Because we had a document, I wanted for the new members to understand what we were doing. So thank you, Mr. Starr.
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
Trainee, you're welcome.
Just we don't do it this often, but what this means is we only need 6 votes at the next meeting, because you give notes at this meeting to change something previously adopted. Otherwise, we have to have 8 votes tonight to do this. So it's a smarter way to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. We are now down to audience participation. Anyone like to be heard? Mr. Evans? We took care of them? We took care of that? You're welcome, but thank you. Welcome. Please state your name, spell your last.
Sure. My name is Ron Alleva, A-L-L-E-V-A. And just a quick question. Is that the new timer? Green, yellow, red?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Oh, okay, great. You have 30 seconds left, just kidding.
Are you ready? You know what?
No, please.
I'm willing to buy a clock since I'm the only guy escorted out by security and the chief of police.
No.
I'm honored.
It's all
but
good.
I'm going to start my clock here.
That's
You give me the
great.
signal.
Time to talk.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to support Mr. Couples. It was his mother, along with Ruth Moulton, that developed the downtown park. And it is a disgrace what's taking place there. And in both of their honors, I hope we can take some real positive action. Getting back to the old topic, my property's still for sale. I just saw a beautiful 1,500 square foot structure, has 7 rooms and a conference. It could bring down the cost to Housing First to almost $3,500 a unit. I don't know why they don't look into those facilities. But when you granted the funds of $485,000 to the nonprofits, I think it's important that you not only get the $10,000 back from Beans and Brother Francis, but you should revisit Mr. Starr. Mr. Starr, this is your conditional use, that the negative impact continues at Beans Cafe and the Brother Francis and the surrounding area to the safety, health, economic interference, and the quiet enjoyment of the properties. They should be required to take that money and get a professional security guard, a medic, including getting their staff first aid cards, and get commercial garbage pickup. Without getting confrontational with Mr. Flynn, if you require a bar to have 4, then 8 security guards, you surely wouldn't hire the customers to be the security guards. Why are you doing it at locations where there's over 5,000 calls within 2,500 feet? So this is wrong. And their sanctimonious behavior that they're addressing the problem is a lot of bullspit. You gotta pierce that. This is a con game that goes to addressing all nonprofits getting a free ride, and I'll include the churches, as big business. And if Jim Crockett said Beans Cafe is being run like a business, let's deal with them like a business with the same deck of cards that we do with everyone else. And I can tell you, and Mr. Wellington will verify, that these nonprofits, including Rural Cap, are a con game, and they'll be under investigation. And when you flush them out, surely you won't be giving them any more money, but asking them to return the money you've given them. Oh, I'm getting good.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Mr. Starr.
One of the ways to get the conditional use back in front of the Assembly...
Oh, sorry. That's the alarm.
Well,
okay.
I ask you this because it's a technical perspective, is that if there's a formal violation filed, there's an administrative hearing, and a finding comes out of that, to your knowledge, has there ever been a legitimate complaint that's gone to administrative hearing that has a finding?
No, because they are so circumventing the code abatement that's necessary, and I believe you put it in.
I did. I'll take it. I mean, I was on planning and zoning when that all
Yes,
happened. But
yes.
let me ask you this, though. Why, as a next-door neighbor, why don't you file a formal complaint and have an administrative hearing finding?
Very good, because I sued the Brother Francis, I sued Beans, and I didn't want to sue the city because I'm suing myself. And out of moral...
Not a lawsuit.
Well...
It's basically a finding that they violated terms and conditions of conditional use, and you...
Well, it's so obvious that they violated by the police records that every time it comes before the assembly, instead of slapping them on the fingers or amending their conditional use to hold them accountable, you give them more money.
We cannot amend their conditional
They
use.
just said that the chief of police with
Yeah.
a conditional use can amend by their request, and if that's what the result...
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just, you answered my question, that there's been no formal complaint filed to administrative review. There's been no finding there.
Well,
Thank you.
I kind of question that because when we had code abatement there and I went to planning, they turned it over to the police department, so there can't be any action. That's that great circle that just keeps going on to where it doesn't become effective.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Thank you, Mr. Laba. Mr. Trainee.
Ron, are you still an auctioneer?
No, I retired. I'm a consultant.
Okay, 'cause the city's been looking for one, so I wanted to find
Oh, no. The state has sent out 800,000
I know, but
in
the city
commissions.
hasn't sent them.
The city's looking for one, so is the school district. We could perform those services. In fact, I talked to is this community developed? You should join the state, take over the land on Reeve, and you could build a whole sustainable industry with the auction industry.
Just our purchasing department's looking for an auctioneer, and I figured since you're good at it.
Well,
I wanna
yes,
do that.
I'm still around, but I'm dwelling more into the law.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Thank you, Ron. Anyone else wish to be heard? Ron, you're done. Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah, you will. Anyone else wish to be heard? Any assembly comments?
Mr. Couples really has listened to you all and see what it did to him.
Yeah. Any assembly comments? Okay, motion to adjourn? Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, Madam.